I guess we're live now, so welcome everyone to the last meeting of the interim for travel, recreation, wildlife, and cultural resources. Welcome. I hope there wasn't too much concern because we had 3 different times for this today. We had a 2 o'clock time, we had, and some of our notes said 1:30, some of our notes said 1:40. So we're splitting the difference. And we had a beautiful tour to start the day, and we want to thank, our state parks folks. Took us on a great tour, and we learned an awful lot. So appreciate all of you making the time. Whatever time you thought it started, we're starting now. And so I will go ahead and see if Co-Chair Newsman has anything she'd like to say for opening comments.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. I think we're ready to roll, so we can get going.
I know we are supposed to, at least we were kind of given that directive partway through the season to make sure and mention about our protocols. And so Co-Chair Newsom and I, we just basically say, we're not going to read the whole script. We just say, please be polite, please be professional, direct all your comments to the chair, and we'll get along fine. And so hopefully this is a committee that, like I said, this is the most fun committee of anything you'll come to. So we don't anticipate having any kind of brawls or that sort of thing. So anyway, we're going to start off this morning. Oh, yes, with roll call.
Senator Baldwin. Here. Senator Ellis. Present. Senator Guru.
Here.
Senator Jones. Here. Representative Angelos. Here. Representative Burkhart.
Here.
Representative Byron.
Here.
Representative Larson. Representative Singh.
Here.
Representative Storer.
Excused. She may try to get a Zoom link. She's not feeling well, so
Representative Western.
excused.
Representative Winter. Co-Chairman Schuler.
Here.
Chairman Newsom. Here. You have a quorum.
Okay, thank you so much. With that, we'll go ahead and begin with Director Moore. He's the first one up from the Gaming Commission. Welcome. Even though we know you, please introduce yourself and we'll get started.
Charles Moore, Director of the Wyoming Gaming Commission. Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, thank you, committee members, Madam Chair, for having me here today. I'm glad to be a part of your last meeting, and hopefully we can get a lot of information out to you and help inform you. I have with me today Nick Laramendi, Special Agent Supervisor. I also have in the room Operations Manager Mike Steinberg behind me, and then Senior Inspection Specialist Russell Krause is on the second row back there with us today. I spoke to both chairs on how you wanted to proceed today a little bit. And, as the topic is, it's an update. But I think what I would like to do, if that's your pleasure, would be to address horse safety and the safety at the racetracks in the state of Wyoming.
That would be fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please proceed.
Okay, thank you very much. To kind of give you a little bit of an overview first, the Wyoming Gaming Commission, we regulate parimutuel wagering, which includes live racing, simulcasting of live events, historic horse racing, rodeo events, and the Wyoming Breeders' Award Program. We also regulate the skill-based amusement games that are throughout the state, online sports wagering throughout the state, and charitable wagering to include bingo, pull tab, Calcutta. And we also have a law enforcement division and compliance division, which Mr. Laramendi heads up on that side of the house. Again, after speaking with the chair in the concerns with track safety this summer in Wyoming, I'd like to address that. The commission's primary mission is to protect the wagering public and the health, safety, and welfare of the participants in all lawful gaming and parimutuel activity. We are committed to serving our clients, our customers, and the participants at the racetracks and all wagering in the state of Wyoming. As far as qualifications, the people that we hire, the people that we have in place here to oversee live racing, I have over 50 years experience with live racing parimutuel activity, and then also the gaming that we have now. The agency and myself, we are a part of the Association of Racing Commissioners International. I'm on the board of that association. And how does that relate to horse racing? Again, the Association of Racing Commissioners International, we have 39 jurisdictions in North America that are members of this group. Again, what does that mean? We talk, we're communicating, and we're working with all of our colleagues throughout North America on racetrack safety and improving those events. The commission at the races, we delegate pursuant to 1125-104G, the authority to regulate the act. And the act in this situation is live racing. We hire certified individuals, they're accredited and are required to participate in continuing education and retain their education. Our stewards, my presiding steward has over 44 years experience in the industry. The other two stewards have 53 and 49 years in horse racing industry. And then our safety officer, several years ago, we were one of a few states that started the safety program and the safety officers at the tracks. This gentleman has 58 years experience from riding, owning horses, and he was also a world champion jockey in his day. Again, they're all accredited and continue to have that accreditation. We hire a veterinarian that is there at the racetrack. He has over 18 years experience. He's licensed in the state of Wyoming. He's been a regulatory vet for 16 of those 18 years, working at the racetracks and doing our testing and pre-race examinations. So as we move into this summer, we've had an exceptionally large number of breakdowns at the racetrack. It is concerning. It's very concerning to not only the agency, the executive branch. I know it's concerning to you all. It's concerning to the horsemen. It's concerning to everybody involved. But I want to impress upon you the focus that this agency has, and also the focus that there is nationally on this issue. It's all hands on deck. It's everybody looking to resolve and mitigate the issues with the breakdowns at the racetrack, and we will continue to do that. At this point and at this time, we do not have any real substantive what is the problem. It's just glaring out there. We do see that there's 2-year-olds that are involved, which would mean younger horses participating, and maybe they aren't quite developed. We do see an abundance of that. So that is one of the issues. There has been several things that have been done after this initial rash of breakdowns that we experienced at the racetrack. Some of which have been the commission immediately after having this issue. And I might, if I may, I need to back up just a little bit and give you some back history. And I apologize, we perform pre-race examinations at the racetrack. So in the outset of this year, we were doing anywhere from 20 to 30, 40% of the horses. And what we would do, we would look at the horses that were participating, see if we thought we saw some problems, and we would pick a percentage in there and we would do pre-race examinations. Well, when the first set of breakdowns happened, we immediately went to, because they were younger horses, we went to pre-race examining every individual that was participating as a 2-year-old. Well, we then, shortly thereafter, and our plan was to move into what we call 100% of the time. We have now moved into, we have 2 veterinarians that are there in the morning performing pre-race examinations of every participant 100% of the time, and 100% of the horses that are participating now. Subsequently, we saw a drastic reduction in that. And to give you kind of an idea, to date, with all the pre-race examinations, we did a total, I don't have the total in front of me, I apologize, but we had 26, and this is over 52 days of live racing. We had 26 pre-race examinations that resulted in the horse being scratched and was unable to participate. Of that number, and again, you have to bear in mind, as we started the season in May, we weren't doing quite as many pre-race examinations, but we had 4 of those were at Energy Downs at the Camplex in Campbell County in Gillette. 13 of those scratches were at Wyoming Downs in Evanston. And to date, we've concluded the season. We had 9 scratches at Sweetwater Downs. So the program seems, it's working. It's mitigating, it's doing exactly, but even more importantly, with those pre-race examinations, we are seeing people take a little different look. Now, something that I found really interesting, and when you're in the middle of this, you know, you're dealing with things, a real kind of a different look at the problem is you kind of have that light come on in your head a little bit. And I had an individual ask me, well, I'm confused. The trainers are bringing horses over that may not be sound to participate. And I had that kind of you think about that with that in mind. And it's not that they're bringing horses over that are unsound, but some of those horses, you just don't know until the day they're going to participate. It's a very fluid issue. It moves quickly. And so the pre-race exams can really fix that problem. And we had a lot of trainers that started taking a little different focus on their livestock, and we're slowing down the process, giving the horses a little more time off. So as we moved forward throughout that program, we saw that we performed in step 1, we increased our pre-race examinations. Step 2 was to commit to 100% of the horses pre-race examined 100% of the time. And as I said, that created a situation for us where we had to hire an additional veterinarian. And bear in mind, again, these examinations are done in the morning before the horse is on the racetrack. So then the next step in the process of a horse racing is the horse comes over to the paddock. Our veterinarian is in the paddock area, and that's where the horses are saddled. That's that initial area where the saddles are placed on the horse, and the jockeys then get on, and then so we have a veterinarian that is watching each and every one of those animals as they are in the paddock area, and they go to the racetrack, and then when they're behind the starting gate, they're watching and they're paying attention, and they will if they see a horse that's off, or if a jockey decides that he wants his horse looked at, the veterinarian is right there and available to examine that animal and end up, if he needs to, scratch the animal if there's a concern. So then step 3, Wyoming Downs implemented very quickly a policy to exclude 2-year-olds from entering races. The policy was later amended, taking into consideration the prepaid races that they had been entered in, and they resumed allowing 2-year-olds to participate. This policy did reduce the 2-year-old exposure, but still allowed for those 2-year-olds, those younger horses, to participate. Step 4 in the process, Wyoming Downs implemented a workout policy. All first-time starters, primarily 2-year-olds, but not limited to, it were first-time starters, had to have a workout on their racetrack. So they were accustomed to the track, they knew the track, and they'd been there. Step 5, Wyoming Downs reconditioned the racetrack very quickly under the guidance of their consultants, and then later on they renovated the track again with the assistance of track superintendent from Wyoming Horse Racing. And then step 6 is that continuing to review, continuing to look at the issue, continuing to refine it. So one of our initial steps in this process was we formed a safety committee. after the first weekend of issues at the racetrack, we formed a safety committee to include commission staff, to include the operators, the permittees, the racetrack operators, and also to include the horsemen and veterinarians. We formed that committee. We discussed. At that point, we had our stewards at the racetrack, which they're hired to regulate the act, and they understand racing and they know what's going on. They put together a report for us, and they were in the process of doing that. The committee has reviewed the report. They've looked at that, and then they came up with some steps moving forward. And again, all of the steps and the issues that were made initially, after July 16th, we had no more breakdowns at the racetrack at Wyoming Downs. So the committee came up with points of emphasis. The first one was a shared problem requiring a shared effort from all individuals, the state, the horsemen, and the track operators. They also, one of their points of emphasis was track condition. Coordinate your efforts between the 3 racetracks in the state. Coordinate equipment if possible. If there's a shortfall, everybody work together for a common goal together. They also came up with, the committee did, workouts and past performances. I'm not sure how many of you have been to the races and been to a racetrack, but just to see, this is what they call a past performance. This is basically tells everything that that animal has done, has participated in. And so what they wanted to do by their recommendations, if I can get to the right page, I apologize here. They wanted to look at the workouts, see where these horses are, and see where they had been training, and see if we could come up with any connections. At this point, we don't really see a lot of that connections. But we continue to look at the past performances, pay attention to those, and see if we have anything that starts to glare at us and try to dial down on the data. We have a lot of data. We have a lot of things that we have to look at, and we're continuing to do that. And we're committed to doing that and bringing this to a solution. Also, one of the issues that they had in their points of emphasis was coordination between the permittees. All 3 of, along with, sharing equipment and looking at a lot of those different things, coordinate a little more to where some of the horses that are participating, we can spread those out throughout the summer. And maybe, I'm not sure if that's the right way to phrase it, but de-emphasize maybe some of the younger horses racing and emphasize more on the older horses that are participating. And how you do that in purse money. You do that in where the money, they go to the money. I mean, that's an obvious scenario. So attempting to emphasize more of the older horses racing, which are more seasoned and in physically better shape, potentially to participate. Again, the committee also recommended what we are currently doing at the state: 100% previous exams, 100% of the time. Wyoming Horse Racing also decided to eliminate the 770-yard races at their racetrack and the 3.5 furlong races. And the reason for that, horses are running so fast into the turns, they need to have a little more time to get to the turn, to get set up, so to speak, for those turns and be able to make it. And so they eliminated that quickly at Wyoming Horse Racing as well. Wyoming Horse Racing and the committee also determined a 72-hour stand down for horses. We didn't want to have horses racing on a Friday, coming back and potentially racing on a Saturday or a Sunday. So 72-hour stand down on older horses. And then They also wanted us to look at an 8-day stand down for all the younger horses to make sure we don't have these younger horses running weekend after weekend after weekend after weekend. And again, the agency along with the committee will review the rules and make revisions where they're necessary and develop best practices document for the horsemen and for the permittees. I've kind of rattled on a little bit there, and I do apologize. I can continue on with some more information if you'd like, or I could potentially take some questions at this point.
I think we have some questions, if that's all right, Director. Go ahead, Senator.
To you, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Welcome, Mr. Moore.
Thank
Just
you.
a couple of quick questions for you here. I wrote them down so I wouldn't forget. The first one was, of those 26 horses that were scratched in the pre-race examination, what were the problems? What was found with those horses? That's the first part of my question. Second part of my question is, how many of those that were scratched were 2-year-olds?
Director?
Madam Chair, Senator Baldwin, great question. And I apologize. I don't think I have that information today. I can get that. It's available. We have that, and we have that documented. So I can get that for you. I will say there's a high percentage. Those are the younger horses. The injury that you typically see is a shin issue, what they call shin buck. The horses will be a little sore on their shins. And when you palpate the shins, they move from that. And I know with your experience, I'm hoping you're following a little bit of this, with the medical side, because if you aren't, it's because of me, not you. I want you to understand. And then the other one is it's potentially when they're placing pressure and they're palpating the knees and the ankles, they're seeing some pain and injury there, or it's a foot problem too. It's the frog, it's the underside of the foot, and you're seeing some discomfort there. But I will get that for you.
Great.
Nick is writing it down as we speak for me.
I appreciate that. As a matter of fact, yeah, I know the medical part, but my veterinarian makes me take care of my own horses.
Mhm.
So when my horse needs sewed, particularly if it's 20 below us, I have to sew them.
Other questions for the Director? Actually, I have a couple. You answered a couple of them that I was going to ask about, and I was going to ask about the stand down issue, because my understanding, at least with a couple of the horses, maybe over in my neck of the woods, there was some chatter out there that maybe they were racing out of state in between our races in Wyoming Downs, and then maybe that was the issue. Is there any way to get data on that, or can you, you talked about, the performances, if they've raced at a legitimate race, you'd have that data, but can you follow up on that?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. What you're referring to is either the unofficial races or the match races that are going on in some of our neighboring states. We do not have match racing that we're aware of going on in the state of Wyoming. If there is, please let us know. We will be in the middle of that ASAP. But we're seeing a lot of match racing, and we're seeing a lot of match racing all over North America, primarily with the quarter horses. And it's primarily focused on the quarter horses. Those races are not sanctioned, so there's no record. Those races are not monitored, again, so there's no record. So it's very, very, very difficult to follow.
Co-Chairman Newsom was wondering if you would explain the match races a little bit better.
Thank you, and I apologize. And also to follow up on that too, those horses that are participating in match races, which I'm going to define, they are also running under different names. A lot of these people, it's Brownie or whatever, they're just coming, it's not their registered name. And so this is defrauding the public, but it's outside of our jurisdiction. It's a real problem. The American Quarter Horse Association has been focused on this for a couple of years, looking into it, trying to figure out how, as a breed registry, as the largest breed register in North America, how do they fight that battle? This is something that is in discussion with the Association of Racing Commissioners International. How do we put some of that data together on those races? To define match racing. Match racing is basically two horses leaving a starting gate, and they're betting on them, whatever. Some of the match races, they'll bet who gets out of the starting gate first. Some of them, it'll be for the yardage, you know, if it's a 400-yard, 300-yard, whatever distance it is too. They'll bet on pretty much anything involved in that. So I hope that explained match racing, what it is. It's two horses matching together and seeing who the winner is.
I have one other question too. I think one of the really, I think, positive things you did was instigating rules for the horses to have a practice on the track that they're going to run on. How do you monitor that to make sure that that's happening?
Yes, thank you for the question. The racetrack, the racing office at the racetracks, they're monitoring that through what we call the Encompass system. An Encompass system is this is what generates this document. Those are entered into the national database. And by the way, this information, when it goes in there, that information is following them across North America to all racetracks. This is not something that's uniquely printed. I mean, yes, this is unique to Sweetwater Downs, but this information is at all racetracks. We use the same program, the same information is derived and provided to the public. I think I went down and got away from your original question. I apologize. Our stewards are also monitoring those workouts. At the bottom of this list, you'll see, and I know it's very small, you can't see it, but right there, you'll see all the workouts. And, you know, just to grab one here, we have on April 23rd, April 30th of 23 at Weber Downs, 220 yards. The horse was worked from the starting gate. He breezed from the gates in 12:58. So there's also information on here about scratches. If a horse has been scratched in the race, you see that. So they're monitoring those workouts. They see those workouts, and if they have a horse that's ineligible, those horses are scratched. Or it's routinely to find out, okay, Mr. Trainer, client, customer, you know, where did your horse work? You've expired your workout date. So where did you work? And they'll say that. We'll look it up, see if it missed the program, and then you'll research that too. So our stewards, our safety officer, the racing office, the assistant racing secretary, everyone is monitoring that.
Just one other question I had, and then I'll see if anybody else has questions. I just kind of wondered, and you hadn't mentioned it, whether or not you thought the weather this spring may have had a lot to do with some of the situations with our horses. I know a lot of folks said because of the monsoons and, you know, late snow and lots of rain that they didn't get their horses out. And I don't suppose there was any way to monitor that at all. But do you think that had an impact on some of the things that happened at our tracks?
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, we're hearing very similar that the weather, and yes, April 15th, we had 46 inches of snow in Casper, Wyoming. So that does derail your training, obviously. And we did hear that. We did hear that, you know, in the Salt Lake area and around there, that it was really delaying a lot of that, getting those horses ready and those younger horses ready.
Yeah, go ahead, Co-Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So from what I've read, this is not unique to Wyoming. The other racetracks throughout the United States have had the same problem, Churchill Downs and others, Ruidoso. And so what do you know, what steps they've taken to address this problem, if any? Because what I know, I'm the liaison to the Gaming Commission from the House, for those of you that don't know, but I've been impressed with how quickly the industry responded, how quickly the racetracks responded, how quickly the Gaming Commission responded when this became a problem. And I'm hoping that other tracks around the nation have quickly responded as well for the health of the racing industry.
Director?
Madam Chair, Madam Co-Chair, thank you. Yes, it's an industry problem. It's if you're at a racetrack in North America right now, you're experiencing some of these very similar issues. If you're not, kudos to you. As far as processes and procedures, you know, whether it's Churchill Downs, whether it's, you know, Santa Anita in California, or whether it's Remington Park in Oklahoma City or Riados in New Mexico, we are doing virtually identical things here in the state of Wyoming to mitigate it. We're just doing it in a smaller scale with less resource. The pre-race examinations is a big thing. And again, you know, we have been doing pre-race examinations of horses. Every horse, as I said, has been looked at and is being looked at the racetrack. The pre-race exams, we implemented that 2 to 3 years ago, I believe it was, and we're doing a percentage of the horses. We increased it this year to 100% of the time. And that is exactly what they're doing in other jurisdictions. 5, 6 years ago, we were one of the first states that hired a safety officer and then have a safety steward at the racetrack. Most all racetracks in North America now have employed a safety officer. This is an individual that's his focus. He's on the ground, he's there in the paddock, along with the veterinarians, along with the horsemen, along with everyone monitoring the situation. And so we're doing the same things that other jurisdictions are doing. And then I think one of the biggest things is communicating. I think educating the horsemen and in communicating with everybody and trying to get everyone on the same page. I liken it to a stool with 3 legs. We have the state, we have the track operators, and we have the horsemen. We have to have all 3 of us working together for this common goal. And that is one of the messages that this committee that we formed is pushing forward, is that commitment from everyone involved, all stakeholders, state, permittees, everyone, to ensure we have the safest facilities that we can possibly have in the state of Wyoming.
Other questions for Director Moore? Okay, go ahead and proceed.
Thank you. One of the other things that, and again, I hope I'm not boring you too much on some of these things, but I always think it's helpful to educate and help people understand, to give you an idea of what our process is when there's an injury at the racetrack. The first thing that happens when we have an injury is there's a call on the radio. All the officials have radios, and there's that call to action. A couple of these things happen simultaneously, because here we are, we're in an industry, we're not like we have with the NFL. If they have an injured player, you have one player, or you have humans that you're addressing. We have livestock, we have horses we're addressing. So once that call on the radio comes in, the EMTs and medical personnel are attending to that human athlete. Simultaneously, the commission, the track practicing veterinarian, and the track officials are attending to that equine athlete. There are instances in these situations to where the equine athlete and the human athlete are in such a close proximity to where it's decisions are being made. Obviously, you know, you lean towards that human athlete. You want to protect that one, and you're trying to protect the other one if they're both injured. So, and we have had a situation this summer where it was very close proximity, and you have a group here working on the human athlete, and we have individuals working on the equine athlete. During that process, the veterinarians are determining, again, this is all happening very quickly within a matter of minutes and seconds, once everybody gets on site there. The state veterinarian, when practical, he's pulling blood. He takes a blood sample from that horse. each and every time when we can in that situation. That blood sample is saved, and then we send that off for testing. When we test that, we're looking for, any overages. We're looking at that sample just as we would from every horse that participates at an event. Again, the medical personnel are addressing the human athlete. Track officials, as I said, they're attending that equine, they're dispatching their horse ambulance, and they're assisting crew to deal with that if the horse needs to be transported off the racetrack. Typically, if a horse is in distress at the racetrack, and I'm going to move to the horse side of it now because we've got the ambulance crew dealing with the human side of it, but move to the horse side if you don't mind. Very high percentage, 98 whatever percentage of the horses that have a problem at the racetrack, they're loaded immediately, whether it's a catastrophic, potentially a catastrophic injury or not, they're loaded into a horse ambulance. This ambulance is designed to transport the horse on the racetrack. It's designed for that specific purpose, to get that horse off the racetrack as quickly as possible, and then where they can make those determining decisions on what to do. Again, at that point, the safety steward is kicking in his documentation process. He's gathering information, the location on the track, the different things that are coming into play. We have a document that he fills out, and he's starting to check the boxes and make the notes and put that together. Again, as I said, the veterinarians are determining the extent of the injury and potential next steps. Postmortem exams may be part of that step. Those are performed at the conclusion of the day. Within 24 hours or as soon as practical, the stewards, the safety steward, they conduct interviews. I call them exit interviews. They're conducting interviews with the individuals that were part of that issue and gathering that information so we can glean whatever we can to learn. This is putting this data together so we can look and figure out if there's anything that we need to be doing to change our process. Each morning, and I'm going to move a step away, before the races start, management meets with our track stewards, and this is a safety meeting. It's been routine for years, but we formalized it this year. It's a routine thing that I did every year when I was at the racetrack. You come through, you say hi to the stewards, you check in. Is there any problems? You move on. We formalized that process this year. Then at the conclusion, with this information comes in, the stewards may take appropriate action if determined necessary and reasonable. And what that means is, does a trainer need to be addressed for a potential violation? Is there an issue with the rider that maybe was involved in this that had a potential violation? And then those reports are all produced and they're reported to the commission within 24 to 48 hours after the injury. We're notified immediately that the reports are concluded and they're absent the toxicology reports. Then the commission staff will review the reports and may recommend or take further action if required. So that's process. There's a lot of things that kind of spread you out depending on the type of injury and what you're dealing with, but that is the basic process. I think in closing here, and I want everyone to understand that there's no commissioner, there's no commission employee or contracted service provider that would knowingly participate at an event which is unsafe. We spend a lot of time looking at those facilities. We inspect those facilities prior to racing, and they're continually being monitored by our track stewards throughout the race meet. And a race meet is if you have 52 days of racing, it's day 1 to day 52. We're monitoring that process. The stewards are consulting the veterinarians on all instances, all trainers on all instances, jockeys, and the owners. And they're asking them questions. How are the horses doing? How are they pulling up after a race? How is the condition of the track? They're monitoring that. Along with that, the track operators are doing that. The track operators are down there in the morning watching the workouts. They're seeing the horses that are working in the morning. And some of you have gone to Wyoming Downs and had the pleasure to see the facility in the morning. The track operators are there. They're monitoring this and they're looking at this along with our employees. At any point throughout the process at the racetrack, once a horse is saddled and on the racetrack, a jockey can ask a commissioned veterinarian to look at the mount. Hey, the horse does not seem to be moving quite right. The veterinarian will look at it, and I doubt if we've ever denied, if a jockey feels he is a concern, even absent the veterinarian looking at it, that horse would be allowed. The jockey could either get off the mount or find another rider, or the horse would be scratched. So again, you know, in this world that we live in, there's no neutrality in the world. And we are part, and you are either part of the solution or you're going to be part of the problem. We all need to work together, and we need to be a part of the solution. And I thank you, and I stand for questions.
Questions for Director Moore? Just one other question. I was going to ask this before and forgot, just for my edification. Of the horses that we lost, were the majority of them from breakdowns, you know, fractures, that sort of thing, or did we have cardiac issues too?
You want to?
Madam Chair, the majority of those were from some sort of a fracture.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Okay, thank you so much. That helps a lot, I think, to give us some good background, because certainly we are like you. We want to make sure that everybody's having a great time and everybody's safe. So, all right.
And just one last piece, if there's anything that any of you, if you have any questions, if you have any concerns, please reach out to us, the commission, to the commissioners, to anyone, if you want more information on this and follow up. And again, we will get that information. We will get the information from Senator Baldwin here that he asked for, and we'll get that to you. And we'll have that hopefully by Friday.
Great. Okay. Co-chair.
So Director, before you leave, we're taking up the next bill, and I would like you to describe the problem that we're trying to solve. And then Lucas will go through the bill.
Madam Chair, I'll pass that on to Mr. Laramende. He is the one that can do that the best.
Madam Chair, thank you. So the problem that we are trying to solve is about 2 years ago, the FBI reviewed our laws as far as our fingerprinting authority to obtain national background checks. And the FBI has determined that Wyoming statute doesn't conform to public law. And they are telling us that we need to have in our statutes defined the people that we license. They, looking at this draft bill, they took real issue with where it says an employee of a permittee or a participant who is directly involved, because they don't understand what a participant directly involved is. So they really wanted us to break that down to jockey, trainer, owner, and so on and so forth. I hope that helps.
Oh, go ahead.
So Nick, could you describe the time frame we're under to get this solved?
Certainly. Thank you, Madam Chair. So we received I don't know if I'd call it a grace period that expired June 1st of this year. They gave us another grace period through June, I guess it would be July 1st of 2024. So we have until July 1st before they ultimately remove our authorization to obtain national background checks.
And what would happen if we lost that authority?
It would make it very difficult for the commission to do their statutory authority, because the statute says that we must obtain background checks to issue these licenses, and we would no longer be able to obtain said background check to license these individuals. We could still get Western states, 5 or 6 states on the western side, but we can't do the national background checks.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So that would affect our online sports betting.
As I understand it now, they are okay with online sports wagering. They're okay now with skill games. Because the only thing with skill games was the article versus chapter 3 that was fixed in the Scrivener's error. So the only thing that they really have issue with now is on the pari-mutuel side of it.
Senator, question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Maybe this is then a question for Luke, but then I'm wondering why there's language in here looping in skill-based amusement games and online sports wagering on page 4, is it? Because those seem to be all regulated in separate sections. So that's my first question, is why they're looped in there and the need for it. And then the second piece of it is, if you, and I just sent my colleagues the language, when we did online sports wagering and skill-based amusement games, we gave the commission, or we directed you to say, if people have questionable criminal backgrounds, you have to deny their application. And we were trying to give you some rules to run with so you could say, yeah, this person should not be gaming at any level in Wyoming. The pari-mutuel wagering doesn't have that restriction right now. So I'm wondering if we're going to go back in here and really clean this up and be serious about providing parity on how we treat all vendors that you, or all applicants that you guys regulate. I don't think this draft goes far enough. I think we need to probably include some of those parameters. You know, if these individuals have certain criminal background, things in their criminal background, if they're not providing you with updated information, and I think that ties into what you were saying, if you've changed a horse's name, you have a duty to disclose that. We require that for the online and for skills. So I'm wondering why we didn't kind of take a better look at strengthening this law while we're opening it up. So if you have any thought on that, I'd be curious to know.
Madam
Mr.
Chair.
Larramendi?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Senator Ellis, I think that's great. It would really help, actually, to have them kind of across the board and give us mandatory statutory disqualifies on the pari-mutuel side. I think that's a great idea.
Follow up? Are you good? Okay.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair,
go
one
ahead.
other thing, as far as
Sure.
having the skill-based and stuff group back into that, I can't answer that question for you.
Any other questions for Director? Yes, go ahead, Senator.
Madam Chair, I just want to make sure I understand this too. Again, on the online online wagering and skill-based amusement games, we also say if you are misleading with your application and you're not being truthful, the commission discovers that, it's grounds for revoking your license. And then there's a kind of a catch-all provision, I think, in those statutes that say if you're not following all these provisions, you're subject to penalties. When I read the penalty section in the pari-mutuel, it only says you don't get your license to race. So is there a need to have a conversation of, if you've got someone intentionally tampering with or providing misinformation in their application, do we need another hook of some other kind of penalty that mirrors maybe what we have in online or skill-based? And I just want to make sure I'm reading the statute correctly.
Mr. Larramendi, do you have a comment?
I do, Madam Chair, Senator Ellis. Statutorily, we don't have any provisions for how we handle that internally and in our rules. We actually, in the pari-mutuel rules, we do have falsification of a license. So if somebody forgets a arrest or a conviction, they're marked in our system as a do not process. They get pulled before the Board of Stewards. The Board of Stewards has a hearing and the Board of Stewards issues fines for those violations. And then they have to resubmit applications that are correct. And of course, depending on what type of criminal conviction they have, would kind of lead to that.
Madam Chair, just to follow
Yes,
up.
go ahead.
What's the range of the fines?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
This year they were doing, I think it was $150 per fine. They can do up to 1,000.
Madam Chair, one more
Yes, go
follow-up.
ahead.
Does that go on their criminal background record? Or is that just an internal fine that you pay to an agency that doesn't really show up for future considerations for applications if they were to apply in some other state?
Mr. Larramendi?
Madam Chair, Senator Ellis, it goes through the ARCI database, so every racing jurisdiction sees that. So if somebody left here and went to New Mexico to get licensed and they were just fined for falsifying their license here, when New Mexico licenses them, it pops up that they have a ruling against them, and it says that they were charged with falsifying a license, and they can actually see like the whole ruling. It gives all the details. This is the date they filled out their application. They falsified number X, so on and so forth. It follows them through the racing world. It follows them nationwide.
Yes, go ahead, JT. Representative Larson. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, given your grace period with the FBI ends on July 1st, do you see a need to change the effective date in this bill? Because that is July 1st as well. I don't know if you think it should be effective immediately, how you feel that should be approached.
Director or Mr. Laramendi, either one?
Madam Chair, thank you. It should be effective immediately, yes.
Other comments or questions? Okay. With that, we'll turn you loose. Maybe just hang around in case we have other questions for you after we take a look at this bill. And I think we'll turn the time over to Lucas to take us through the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Luke Plum, LSO. Just going to run through 24 LSO-0224. This is parimutuel and gaming activities amendments. This bill was based fairly heavily on 2023 House Bill 183 from this past session. And so, what this one is doing is specifying the persons who are involved in horse racing and parimutuel wagering activities, as well as other activities that are regulated by the Wyoming Gaming Commission, who will be subject to criminal background checks. And so on page 2, all of these changes are made within Wyoming Statute 1125-104, a few subsections within there. And on page 2 in subsection 3, there's just a change. There's an inclusion of a sentence to amend in that the commission shall have rules that will include requirements for internal controls of all aspects of parimutuel wagering, including procedures for system integrity, system security, operations, and accounting.
Madam Chair,
Yes, go ahead, Senator.
can you elaborate on what we're getting after with those definitions?
Go ahead, Lucas.
Madam Chair, Senator Ellis, I think the goal here is really just to ensure that they have rules in place for their security and for because they're going to be going through with these background checks that they can't share with anyone else. I think it's just kind of a general, they should have rules that they are maintaining systems correctly for maintaining criminal background check information and other information within the commission. Is as I understand the point of that one.
Go ahead and proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Continuing on to page 3, I'll just jump. So subsection F is kind of where a lot of this important information is. It does say each permittee, and then it does, as Mr. Laramendi mentioned, delete the language about a participant and employee or a permittee who is directly involved in the horse racing or parimutuel wagering activities. And so instead now it just reads each permittee, licensee, and any person who, because of their employment, has access to the restricted areas or animals housed on permanent event grounds for horse racing, parimutuel wagering, or online sports wagering activities.
Go ahead, Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have questions about this. First of all, I know Mr. Laramendi talked about the person's employment. I don't think I fully understand that, because it seems like this narrows the scope of who has to be licensed to be back there, right? They have to have a permit if you're employed, but if you're a guest or someone that's on grounds and you're maybe a friend of one of the commissioners and they're taking you around, I think that's my concern is, if we're trying to have improve safety and security of these areas, adding the person's employment really narrows that. Because then it could make, well, I'm not an employee, I'm a guest, I'm a VIP. I want to go back there and check it out. Like this allows them to do that. And I thought maybe the intention is to lock this down a little bit more. So can you talk to me about the FBI's determination, and do we need person's employment in there? I think anyone who has access to these places should have a permit.
Mr. Plum?
Madam Chair, Senator Ellis, I think that actually was an issue that the FBI had, is they were concerned about being overbroad. That was some of the language, such as person who is, or participant who is directly involved. They specifically called out that language as something that they didn't like. I think the idea here is that, it's employees, people who are actively participating and would essentially have an effect on the activities are the ones who need to be checked without giving the state the broad authority to check anybody they want to. I think that's kind of the whole goal, and hopefully the Gaming Commission could provide some additional light on that if needed. But I really do think the FBI is looking for, maybe you don't necessarily need to check the janitor, but you should be checking all the other employees to be actively doing that. And I don't know. I do think, the participant was an issue that they had. As I understood, kind of some of the comments that they made was that it should be specifically the people who are involved, who, if they're employed in these activities, should be the ones who are having these background checks. But that way it's narrow enough that you're specifically saying who will be checked without letting it be too broad. It's kind of trying to find that middle ground, is as I understood the FBI's issues with the language that's already in here.
And then a follow-up question, Madam
Go
Chair.
ahead.
So just in our list of things, we're trying, now this language was always written for the parimutuel, but now we're starting to smush in some online sports wagering, but then there's no mention of skill-based amusement games in here. So I'm wondering why that's excluded. To me, that just creates confusion of why they're not there. But then as you move on throughout the bill, then we include all three of them in the same thing. I feel like if this is a problem with the parimutuel activity, then that should be limited to that. But I wanted your guidance on why it just says parimutuel online, why not skill-based if we're going to go with all three. In my mind, I think online and skill-based are covered elsewhere in their respective statutes, but I just want to understand that better.
Mr. Plum?
Madam Chair, Senator Ellis, I think that's a good catch. I realized, that, continuing on to the next page of 4, right? Yeah, that they are included in there, the skill-based amusement games. And that's even kind of, how last year's bill was, is it was a little more split out, but it did include the operators. And I realized, that perhaps that was just an oversight, not to include the skill-based there, because it does, you're right, for the parimutuel or online sports wagering. So that may be something, the committee should consider. I think that's a good catch.
Any other questions? Yes, go ahead.
Madam Chair,
Senator.
just my follow-up though is I'd rather remove online sports wagering and not add skill-based there.
Sure.
I would rather this just apply to parimutuel since that's where the problem is. But I just want to make sure that that doesn't get us further away from the FBI's objective.
Comments on that, Mr. Plum?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Senator Ellis, I think that is a good question. I think just that I think the thought here from last year's bill, and then especially kind of how the changes have been made for this year's bill, it was more, yes, they didn't seem to have issues with that, but it was more, we're talking about background checks here, and yes, it is within the parimutuel sections of statute, and that. But in subsection K on page 4, right, where we're talking about they shall have access to the criminal record information for all operators and vendors. It does say under Article 3 of this chapter, so it's kind of different. But then we get into permittees and employees of the commission under 91627D. Just, it seemed like it was kind of trying to catch all the places that, for the people who are connected to the Wyoming Game Commission who would need to be checked. So it was more of a, should we just include them all to try and be safe, to make sure that that there won't be issues with the FBI as opposed to leaving anyone out.
Okay, any other questions? Okay. You want to finish up, or are you done?
Madam Chair, I'll just briefly say, on page 4, this is kind of where the big change from last year's bill happened, is on the top. It's still subsection F, but starting on line 2 of page 4, it's where it says all applicants for licensees or permits under this chapter, operators and vendors of skill-based amusement games, all online wagering, sports wagering vendor and operator executive officers, all parimutuel employees, because of their employment, shall be subject to commission review of criminal history record information, and as defined in subsection K. And the change here, I'll say, I certainly think that this is for the committee's consideration, whether this is inclusive enough. Last year's bill included a laundry list of employees from who are parimutuel employees, specifically mentioning things such as, owners, exercise riders, trainers, groomers, all these things. And it just was my understanding, or at least some of the comments that I heard, that the list wasn't necessarily preferred. And so that's why it's still trying to incorporate all of these people. And it just is it is a little more general. And so I think once you're just trying to find that line between specific enough, but also not overbroad. And so, so that's just kind of the last thing. And then, this bill would be effective July 1, 2024, but of course, for the committee's consideration. But with that, I take any other further questions.
Questions for Mr. Plum? Yes, go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do you know if in the parimutuel statutes, if the commission is required to parse that out in their rules of who are like the key employees versus, maybe non-key employees, or making that line distinction of who we are trying to regulate and who needs licenses and permits versus who don't? Do you know if that's, I don't think it's required in their statutes that they do it, but I'm wondering if in their rules, if you're aware that if they do that, if they've made those distinctions of who needs permits and licenses versus those who don't.
Madam Chair and Senator Ellis, I don't know, but I believe maybe Gaming Commission could provide that information.
I was going to say, Gaming Commission, it looks like you're shaking your head. You must know the answer to this question. Go ahead, Mr. Larramendi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Ellis, we do have those defined in our rules. It lists the, the pony riders, jockeys, actually has types of license. We have a type 1 and a type 2 license, and it lists all those individuals out as who's required to have a license.
Senator Ellis,
Thank you,
follow-up?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Larramendi, so that's, I guess, what I'm wondering is if we, and I'd rather, instead of doing this goofy language that says by their employment, to me, that just is unclear. If we need language in here that says the commission shall identify through rules the types of positions that require a permit or license, and then that segues into giving you that authority, and then we can connect that to these additional changes we're making. It seems like that would be consistent and not too much of a heavy lift since you've already got that list made. Then we know who we're talking about. Who we're targeting by passing some of these changes.
Madam
Any
Chair,
comments on that?
if I understand your question correctly, so we had tried to do that back in 21. We had sent the FBI our rule book to where it says, look, these are who is directly involved, and they took issue with that. Not issue with the list per se, but the issue that it's not, those people aren't listed in the statute. And they're saying that since the entire legislative body didn't vote on our rule book, then we need to move those into the statute. That's why last year there was the list of pony riders, plotters, jockeys, owners, trainers, and so on.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Plum.
Just also, yes, I just want to echo what Mr. Larramendi said. And yeah, so that's why, once again, I was trying to just mention, right, like last year there was the list of parimutuel employees. And I think that should be something for the committee's consideration. It was just trying to find a little bit different way to approach this and but still trying to find that line between specific enough without being overly specific or under necessarily being overbroad. So, but of course, yeah, I'd welcome any other comment on that.
Director Moore, do you have some
Yes,
comments on that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Charlie Moore, Director of the Wyoming Gaming Commission. I do have with us here today Allison Moore, not related, Deputy Director, DCI, that has been involved in this process throughout, and maybe can shed a little more light, if you don't mind, if that's your
You
pleasure.
bet. Yeah. I don't know if it's Miss Moore or Mrs. Moore. What do you prefer?
I prefer Allison, Chairman.
Okay, Allison, you're on.
Chairman, Director Moore is correct. And Nick hit it on the head that the definitions in the rule book, they may have been okay for the FBI, but they're not voted on by the legislative body. And that's one of the requirements of Public Law 92-544. So that's what we're dealing with here.
Comments?
Madam Chair?
Oh, yes, go ahead,
Can you
Senator
repeat?
Ellis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you repeat that citation?
Yes, it's Public Law 9244.
Thank you.
Questions for, oh, go ahead, Co-Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So do you believe this particular bill meets what we need to do? Or there had been another suggestion that we look at the criminal statute and just reference in the criminal statute this particular citation, 1125-104K in the criminal statute. I don't know if you've seen that suggestion.
I'm not sure who wants to take this on. Looks like maybe Nick.
Madam
Go
Chair.
ahead.
That was actually one of the first suggestions that we had come up with back in 2021 when we were looking at those, because that removed that person directly involved and it still had a group of people, but that
doesn't.
wasn't going to fly either. We did try that one.
Allison, anything else on that you can, I mean, do we look like we're in good shape with what we've got here?
Chairman, one, I misspoke. It's Public Law 92-544. Sorry. And as far as how the FBI would feel about the draft bill that you have, I'm not sure. They do open it up that we can submit draft bills for them to review, so I'm happy to submit this. However, I will note that sometimes it takes months to hear back. We submitted a bill to them in March that we're still waiting on, so.
Good to know. Any other questions or comments for the Gaming Commission or?
Madam
Allison?
Co-Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. One question I've always had, though, is we're trying to bolster some of our requirements, so we're looking at who's involved in all this activity in Wyoming, and one of that has been fingerprinting. I know that's had an impact on DCI. I keep waiting for the request or waiting for the conversation of how you guys are funding that. I know it's been an increase for you, so I feel like this is an opportunity too to say that the commission shall, require the applicant to cover the cost of their fee. Can you give us a sense of how much work, additional work this has been? And I'm not saying that it's not important. I really do think it's important, but how much it costs and how much the toll it's taken on your agency.
Allison, go ahead.
Absolutely, Chairman, Senator. Definitely, we've seen an impact, especially from Gaming Commission. I don't have those numbers with me today. Director Moore or Nick may have an idea, but it definitely has had an impact on us. We have 2 people in our applicant tracking section who process all applicant fingerprint cards. So that's not only Gaming Commission, it's your educators, it's your healthcare workers throughout the entire state. Our turnaround time on fingerprint results used to be 3 to 5 days. It takes several weeks now to get those results back. As far as the cost for the fees, we do charge already. There's already a cost that's associated with that. Each entity that we do fingerprinting for handles that differently, whether the board or the group that's providing the license or the permit, if they cover it, or if the applicant has to cover that fee. But those fees, then we turn around and use to pay like the FBI. So we do have to pay the FBI for those background checks that we're doing.
Other questions for, yes, go ahead, Co-Chair.
So the bill that was looked at last year, what was that, 184?
183.
183.
Madam Chair,
Did the
is-
FBI look at that? Did they have an opinion on that particular bill? You didn't submit it? Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead, Allison.
Chairman, I don't believe that that bill was submitted to the FBI in draft form. And if I'm correct, that's the bill that had died. So sometimes we submit them in draft form, not always. It really kind of depends on if we have the draft. If we know that's more of a final version of a draft, then we'll put those forward if we have the opportunity.
Any other questions?
Madam Chairman,
Yes.
Senator Guru has his hand up.
Oh, absolutely. Senator Guru, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Just a question, I might be for Director Moore or Mr. Laramendi. I'm not sure. The more I hear, the more confused I get. We're looking at this draft bill and understand what the testimony was of what we're trying to do, what the FBI wants, yet it includes people in the game and sports gaming and skill games that we've already taken care of. Yet now I'm hearing that it may not include what we wanted to include on the parimutuel side, but we don't know because the FBI won't tell us. I'm starting to get more confused as we go about this bill, about what it's doing and what it is we're trying to really do. And does this bill do it? I heard from the good Senator Ellis about cutting out certain segments of this, which I think is prudent. But is that where we need to go? And so I just want to hear a little discussion about that before we get into the bill, farther into the bill.
Any answers from anyone on the Gaming Commission or Allison? Okay.
Madam Chair, thank you, Senator Guru, for the question. This bill draft, the first time I had an opportunity to see this was, I believe, on Friday. So we have not been a part of drafting this other than providing the information from the FBI. And again, I can provide that. I provided that to Mr. Plum with LSO. So does it address the problem? In my mind, it is not addressing the problem. The bill that we worked last year through Joint Appropriations Committee in interim, and then last session, that did cover a part of it, because we're also expanding into now the rodeo events, and how do we delineate that? And, if I may, to help kind of with some clarity here for the committee, Public Law 92-544, the first thing, statute must exist as a result of a legislative enactment. B, it must require the fingerprinting of applicants who are to be subject to a national criminal history background check. C, it must expressly or by implication authorize the use of FBI records for the screening of applicants. D, it must identify the specific category of applicants / licensees falling within its purview, thereby avoiding overbreadth. That is basically the crutch of this whole situation and where we're at with this. The FBI is trying to protect everybody with that information, and they want to see this authorized through the legislative branch. It is confusing, but maybe not as confusing as we try to make it sometimes.
Senator Guru, do you have a follow-up, or did that answer your question?
Do a follow-up if I can, Madam Co-Chair.
fine.
Okay, Charlie, what you just read, was that the guy? I'm sorry, I'm once again a little confused. Was that guidance from the FBI specifically on what we wanted? Was that from the last bill? Is that in this bill? What were you referencing in there? I'm sorry.
Director Moore?
Madam Chair, Senator Guru, again, thank you. This was a letter that was drafted to us and provided a year ago or so now, back in 2021. This was the guidance. That was Public Law 92-544, which I read a part of, which was the guidance. And again, I can provide this guidance letter, this document to you all again, and maybe we can come up with a solution here.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Other comments from the committee? Okay, thank you so much. I think we'll go ahead and open it up for public comment, and we'll go from there. So anyone in the room that would like to come up and give us your ideas on this bill draft? Oh, I see somebody important coming up. Are you coming up to testify, President? Welcome. It's good to see you, President.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, both, and committee. This is tough. We were involved last year. I visited, I think, with a good part of you on the committee about this. And I sit in the back and watch the testimony and scratch my head. The guidance letter shows up today, which I had seen it earlier myself. But it appears to me you're trying to fix a moving target problem, that you're making a guess whether the FBI is going to accept what we come up with or not. And, my belief is probably ASAP, either they need to participate directly in writing a bill with you folks or send you a concrete guidance of where it's at. My concerns last year are the same that they are now. Is, you end up with a 4, 5, 6 page bill that gets pretty broad. And if they require one change, it requires another statute change. And my belief is the bill should be as close to a 1-page bill as you can do it. Give all of the authority that you possibly can to the Gaming Commission, but make it fit within there. I think myself, and this is no reflection on the FBI, I trust our Gaming Commission more than I do the FBI to make sure that we're not having bad people doing bad things. I also feel it's really a bad mistake to start dragging in the other parts of it into the FBI part of it. I think we should do one bill that addresses the federal government's needs as narrowly and tightly as we can. And if we want to expand our rules into skill games, other gaming, online, whatever you're doing, let's run a separate bill and we can have the bloody battle on the floor over how we do that. But right now, I take it very serious. The FBI is serious. If we want to keep doing what we're doing, we're going to have to come up with a bill. And I'm not very keen on a bill that starts expanding out that gives the FBI more tools. And, you know, my end is let's get where we can get our fingerprints done, get it done correctly. And then let's us as a state look inwardly and say, how do we make this the very best we can? And, you know, I have deep faith in Director Moore and his commission to do the right thing. I mean, I think in truth, we're way more restrictive than the feds are on almost every area, while appearing that we aren't, because our guys actually understand what our own problems are and how to deal with them. And I think that's what we need to do. So for my end, I'm still loath to look at this bill because we don't know if the FBI is going to take it. We go pass another law and really what they do is say, come back. I also feel like you ought to invite them to the next meeting. They've got a Denver office. I think you should reach out and say, and likely they're not coming, but it gives you a foundation that says you didn't show up. So we passed something, you didn't show up. How do we get it unless you want to do it? And I do think we also should reach out and say, give us your guidance page. What do you require? And maybe Director Moore has that in that letter. When I read it, it didn't look very solid. I believe you gave it to me a year ago, roughly. It's not very to the point. It's got a couple things, but I think we really ought to just go to the very bare bones that they require. And then I would encourage you to take the time and go ahead and do this expansion in a separate bill that we can debate on the floor. I worry you start moving it and different pieces are going to debate it on the floor and amendments are going to come and things get stripped. And that's going to lead to what I believe likely will mean the FBI may turn it down because we've put language in either they didn't want or they don't like. So that's kind of my 2 cents worth. And I'm just as edgy on it as I was last year. I didn't feel like it was the right bill. And I still believe even if we'd have passed it last year, we'd probably still be sitting here doing it because it's pretty apparent it didn't reach everything it needed to. I think we ought to question them hard on laundry lists because they're going to change what they want, or maybe we define someone wrong. I still think we ought to ask them and say, why in the world? Or maybe we do a voice vote on affirming one section of our rule book every year. And that's not the hardest thing to do, by the way. You know, that's actually kind of codifies them into law beyond the rulemaking process, which I don't have a problem. My last comments, and it's always been that way as far as the gaming, is I honestly believe that the gaming rules, or actually the laws in the green books, need to be as minimal as possible and give the commission as much flexibility as possible. Every time we codify pieces into law, it creates a crack that somebody can get through and cheat us that we've got to wait another year to fix. The Gaming Commission meets almost monthly now. If they've got a bad actor and they've done it so far, they stop them on the spot. You know, if somebody's come up with a new drug, they've come up with a new way to game the system. Charlie and his crew are on top of it and they can act. But if we've got them codified into statute, that's, by the way, how we got skill games. They found a way to put a knife between 2 pages of the book and pry it open. And I think it'll happen again the more we go down that path. So I'd stand for questions, and sorry I rambled so much.
Questions for President Driscoll? Go ahead, Co-Chair.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. President Driscoll, so it's your opinion that this particular bill does not hit the mark that we're after?
President Driscoll?
Madam Chairman, Representative Newsom, Chairman Newsom. No, I think it's apparent listening to our own staff that they felt like we've already got some misses in it and we've identified some other ones. And so, no, I think we're likely going to draft a bill that is going to require a further fix. And I think we really need to find out. I know they don't get a hold of us good, but I guess to me, we can pass a one pager and they can tell us you got to come back with something next year if that's the way they're going to play the game. If it buys us a year, it buys us a year. At some point in time, they need to come out and say what they want. I guess I'm not seeing it, and I'd love to see Director Moore come up and say what exactly has to be in a bill to make it work, because I don't think this one has it, and I don't think we've seen a draft of one. So
Just a question for me, President Driscoll, do you think if we stripped out the skill games and, what's the other one I'm asking for? Yes, online sports betting, would that make it narrow enough? Do you think that this would be a starting point that might work?
Madam Chairman, it helps. I actually think, and we kind of started on this clear back when I was in front of you guys quite a while ago, I think it's require a meeting of some kind between Director Moore or our DCI, probably the AG's office, and part of your committee to sit down and say, well, we're not looking at it. Like I said, I think we're shooting at a moving target. You really don't have a good, clear set, defined list, unless I'm missing it, that they actually want, that is going to solve all the problems, and assurances from them that they're not going to change it after we get there. And the more we mess with it, I think the tougher things will get. So, no, I think that helps, but I don't think it gets us there still. That's, I want the ability, it's just like a permit. I hand it to you and you stamp it and say it's good or not let's pass a law and then have them say a year and a half later, well, it doesn't work. Because, you know, let's face what we're honestly doing. We're checking a box for the federal government. Our guys are capable of doing the background checks that we need and sharing them with other states. We're trying to check a box for someone else that we're already doing it. It's just we're trying to fit in the deal. So it's different than us trying to actually create a law that does something for us. All I see is us trying to get it where the feds leave us alone.
Just as a follow-up, do you think it would be worthwhile to put together a working group with our gaming commission and some of the folks on this committee? I know it's our last meeting, but I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Madam Chairman, I think it's critical. I think if you're going to come up with something that's likely to work, I think you've got to sit down so that when somebody comes up and gets ready to go in front of the legislature, when the bills come up and says, look, we've checked the boxes off, this is what we have to do, and here's the rationale for it. You know, once I'm convinced that's happened, I'll be a lot more friendly on these bills, but until then, I'm still not very sold that we're doing something that actually has the effect of what we're trying to do.
Senator Ellis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I'm just looking at Public Law 92544, and then just doing like the quickest internet research. You know, I find this document that said it was passed by Congress in 1972. It's an appropriation statute that provides funding to the FBI for acquiring, collecting, classifying, preserving, and exchanging identification records. Blah, blah, blah. Reading on it says, the FBI, consistent with several legal opinions from the Department of Justice, have established mandatory elements of a state statute. The state statutes must, 1, exist as a legislative enactment, has some requirements about the criminal background check being fingerprint-based, authorizing submission of those to certain other checks. And I think the big one, though, is identifying the category of licensees amenable to backgrounding. And when I look at state statutes in other states on the categories of those individuals who need a permit or a license, other states aren't afraid of that having the list. They make a list and they say it includes these individuals and not necessarily limited to, and that has a list. And then it says, or any other positions identified by commission rule. I don't think this is a widespread issue in the country. I think most states have a real lockdown, like really strong gaming regulations when they have them in place. But when I look at our statutes, we just don't have any of that. And then further, this is something, if I were an attorney and my client submits their information, the Gaming Commission looks at it, they really don't have standing to deny that permit. If that person has certain elements of, you know, a criminal history, we've given them in skill-based amusement games the authority to say, no, we can't issue the permit. But for parimutuel, we don't give them that backing. So if your client gets you know, I'm just thinking as a lawyer, if my client were denied that permit, I'd be like, on what grounds? They looked at it, but they don't have the authority to deny it. And so that's where I think that these statutes do need some tightening up. So I appreciate the desire to keep this as a short bill, but I think it's the FBI's desire to kind of, just looking at our statutes versus what I've seen in other states, I mean, I do think we are lacking in this regard. And this issue, unfortunately, you know, we want it to be a small, discrete thing we can clean up, but I don't know that I see it as something short we can just quickly fix and move on. So I just wanted to share that with you. And, you know, if I'm wrong and missing the mark, you know, certainly welcome your thoughts on that.
Madam
President
Chairman,
Driscoll?
I do have a couple comments.
Yes, go ahead.
One, I think you're absolutely right. We need to go further. If it's not there, I think we can easily give the commission that authority without putting it in an FBI bill. I mean, another bill, I'm going to vote for it in a heartbeat. And as I said, I think we need two separate bills, one that addresses the FBI end, one that enhances commission authority. The other part of what you read in other state laws was exactly what they came after us on last year, is it says they require the background checks or other people as required by the commission. That was the part the FBI did not like, or that was the way I understood it. And they just haven't struck it down in other places. We can give them a laundry list, but if they add one name to it, we got to come back and change the book. And so from my end, I'm amicable. Our school system, if you work in the school system in any function, you'll get a background check and you get fingerprinted. I, for one, have no problem with us fingerprinting across the board for all our gaming people. It's not a problem by me. I mean, the janitor at the school has to have one. It doesn't bother me any. That end of it, I think's not a problem. We don't want people, particularly in the gaming industry, that have criminal records. So, you know, for me, I'm willing to look exceptionally broad, but I'm loath to put it in a bill for the FBI that the federal government now can pry through a whole different layer of stuff and dictate more to us. I'm a believer that less is more when it comes to dealing with the federal government. And let's bring a separate bill that I think without a doubt, Director Moore could tell you in the commission that we definitely probably are nearing time that we need some additional sideboards on part of our gaming commission. We knew when we built it that it was a pretty loose commission. It wasn't built in this narrow set of rules. And so mine is, and I'll continue to fight for it, unbelievable authority for Director Moore and the commission, and a very narrow part of the statutes, and where they're not following it when we don't like it, I'll sit in front of you and say, I can't get Director Moore to do what I want. Let's force him to do it by putting it in law. But my belief is they're going to do the right thing without being forced to do it. Thank you.
Madam Co-Chair?
So in order to move this along, I would move that we set this bill aside and that we assign a working group for this issue. And if we would pass that, then I would make suggestion on who should be on that working group.
Would you? That's true. Was there, before we act on that, was there any other public comment? I didn't know if there was or not, so. So what's your pleasure?
So
Madam Co-Chair.
after consulting with my wise counsel to my left, it has been suggested that if we don't move this bill, that then somebody has to bring an individual bill. We could move this bill and then amend it in such a way for a recommendation of the working group. Is that correct?
Mr. Plum?
Madam Chairs, yes, if you were to pass this bill, of course, when it comes before committee during the session, yeah, you could prepare an amendment to the bill, you know, even if it is substantial. Or I believe you would have the ability to say you'd like a bill similar to this one. I think there is some, it gets a little dicey when you go that way, but yeah, if you pass a bill and then, yeah, you might run into the issue of it end up having to be individually sponsored. So yes, if you pass the bill, if you want to make any amendments today, and then you can always bring another one during the session.
Go ahead, Senator Baldwin.
Madam Chairman, a wise person to my left down here. My suggestion would be, and it's only a suggestion, I mean, it's up to the chairs, is that that we do form a working group or those stakeholders, not just from this committee, but the director, DCI, et cetera, to put together a group. And then once they come up with something, that this be sponsored as an individual bill and that this bill be tabled today and just put it aside, that the committee not do it, because I think we're putting ourselves in a very sticky wicket, if you will, by trying to pass this forward. But I would suggest that a group get together and that they form a conclusion and that this be sponsored as an individual by someone who is interested.
Okay, you've heard that motion. A discussion on the motion? Yes. That was the motion, to table it. Wasn't that what you made the motion? Okay, just want to double check. Discussion? Second. Okay, there was a second. Any discussion on that? Okay, this question's been called. Let's go ahead and take a roll call. No, we don't need a roll call. No, we don't. Yeah, let's just do a voice vote, shall we? All those in favor of that, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No? Okay, that has passed. So we will table this bill, and do I have some volunteers for a working group, as long as we're talking about it? I think. We need to pass that. No, I think, yep. Go ahead, Co-Chair.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. So I would suggest the working group, Director Moore, Mr. Laramendi be on that, Ms. Moore from DCI be on that, and then myself as Gaming Commission Liaison and President Driscoll as Senate Gaming Liaison Commission. And Senator Ellis, you seem to have a keen interest in this, or you have too much on your plate.
Madam Chair, I'm really conflicted on what to do. I care about these issues. I want to make sure we're getting them right. My experience in working with this particular industry has been really, honestly, quite negative. So I think I probably should, so I don't catch people off guard when the bill comes back and I have concerns. But I just care about the gaming public, and I don't think our statutes are there. So I'm happy to listen in and try again.
Thank you. And Co-Chairman, would you be
Sure.
interested? Okay. And then I might like somebody from the parimutuel industry. I don't know if the.
There's a couple of people back there shaking their hands.
So maybe Ms. Urbikite and Mr.
Lamb.
Lamb, if you would be interested. I think that it's important to have that industry represented.
Anyone else dying to be on this committee? Okay, super. Well, we will get that group together, and I'll again put that in Madam Co-Chair's lap to get us started in terms of when she'd like to get together and where we need to go. So thank you for all the discussion on that. I think we learned a lot. I think we knew coming in, looking at this bill, that there might be some question marks. And so we talked about it even before we got here, that we weren't sure we were hitting the mark on it. So anyway, with that, I guess we will, yeah, we could do that. A break, would that be all right with everyone if we took 10 minutes? Okay, let's be back at 3:18, please. Not that oh, there it is. Woo, we're back. I think we have a quorum here, so let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, yeah, we've got a quorum. So we're going to go ahead and get started, even though this was a short day today. And again, just a big thanks to our state parks people. And I forgot to mention our trolley driver, Miss Sue. I didn't ever catch Sue's last name, but she was amazing. So if you ever come to Cheyenne and you need a good tour, I think she's your tour guide. And so we appreciate you and your staff and the tours today. They were very educational. I learned a lot. So thanks again for that. All right, our next agenda item is we're excited to have Senator Stacey Jones, who's going to lead us off. She's got some really good information on the BLM and the comments that we all have, I'm sure have heard about it, what's going on there, but we want to hear it from the horse's mouth, and she's got some really good information. So go ahead, Stacey, take it away. Senator Jones, I mean.
Madam Co-Chair, I just want to give a little bit of background information on the BLM draft resource management plan that they rolled out last month. It's primarily affecting Sweetwater County, and the plan is actually horrific. It affects almost every way of life and every recreation possible in our county. It affects the trona mining, the oil and gas industry, access to public lands for just regular enjoyment, our tourism, any OHV access to a lot of roads and trails. The right-of-ways really will affect anything that I haven't already mentioned. Hiking, biking, really just everything. We have been told by the BLM that we're not supposed to get upset about this because it's just a draft. And I think we all know that this draft will continue into a full-blown plan. So it's very serious. We're taking it serious. The meetings in our area have been very well attended by our Sweetwater County residents, and I'm very proud of them. They have really been checking into this themselves, and I know I for sure have been getting a ton of calls and emails, and we're all very concerned about this. So I think we have a lot of people here today to testify that know a little bit more about the ramifications of this. And thank you for letting us have it on the agenda today.
And thank you, Stacey. Go ahead, Senator, or I mean, Representative.
Yeah, I just, thanks Stacey for pulling this together. This is very important to the people in Southwest Wyoming. And I heard a report in a meeting I had last week that 700 people signed in at the Rock Springs meeting. And that doesn't count the people who just walked past the sign-in sheet. So I would say we had close to 1,000 people in attendance. So that was a great turnout from our residents, and will go a long ways in arguing with the federal government. So.
And I was one of those that just walked in, and I looked around and there was nowhere to sit and there was no room, and I was starting to get a little claustrophobic. And so I thought, all right, I think we're good here. I've sent my comments in. So it was really, really a great turnout. And I've heard the same thing. I wasn't able to be to the one at Bridge Valley, but I heard the same thing. It was a really great crowd there. So, so we'll go ahead then. Oh, I was thinking that you had, okay. We'll go ahead then and just open it up to the public to go ahead and come in and testify your thoughts on the BLM draft resource management plan revision. I'm sure there's somebody here that might want to, yes, feel free, come on up and introduce yourself, and we'd love to hear from you.
Madam Chairman,
Yes.
quick question for Senator Jones. Who prepared this document that you forward to us? Did you do it, or I'm just curious where it came from?
Madam Co-Chair, no, this was prepared by State Trails.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Nolan Rapp. I am a policy advisor for Governor Gordon. Just wanted to give you kind of a brief overview, the 20,000-foot view of the resource management plan and what the governor's office has been doing on this so far. and we'll be happy to answer any questions, as much as you can be an expert on a 1,300-page document in 2 months. So first off, the BLM Rock Springs Field Office began work on the RMP in February of 2011. Field Office covers 3.6 million acres of surface land and 3.7 million acres of federal mineral estate, mostly in Sweetwater County, as was mentioned by Senator Jones, but includes portions of Uinta, Lincoln, Sublette, and Fremont counties. It is one of 11 RMPs currently in place in the state of Wyoming. RMPs are not new. Right now, the Rock Springs Field Office is working off of a RMP from Green River from 1997. There are 175 field offices in the country. So for the BLM, this is a drop in the bucket. History has been through the NEPA process to select these RMPs that they have a range of alternatives for them to select from A, B, C, and D. Sorry, ma'am.
Excuse us, go ahead, Co-Chair.
Thank you. So we are inundated often with acronyms. So if you could say what RMP means, and then from there on out, you can use that term. But if you could let us know, because we have all these funny acronym things going on.
Go ahead.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Sure. RMP is a resource management plan. So to put together a resource management plan, they go through a NEPA process, the Natural Environmental Policy Act, to create an EIS, which is an environmental impact statement. So that should cover most of them, but in order for them to put together an EIS and have a final RMP, they have a range of alternatives. In this case, you have A through D. A being a no action alternative, they continue the same exact plan as the 97 Green River plan. B, which was chosen as a preferred alternative, is the most constrictive. It uses the least amount of, utilizes the least amount of resources. C, which is kind of the other guardrail, it's the least restrictive and utilizes the greatest amount of resources. And D, which is kind of a middle of the road. It was developed with local cooperators, state agencies, and is generally what is worked the most on with cooperators going forward. So throughout this 12-year process, the BLM will meet with cooperator agencies, state agencies, to try and tease out that middle option. Not one side gets everything they want, but it's more of a compromise, a cooperative effort. So after the 12 years, in August of 23, they finally made the entire draft EIS available to the public for comment, and they are statutorily required to pick a preferred alternative. For everyone working on this for the past decade or so, it was expected that the one that was produced with the most cooperative effort, the alternative D, would be what was chosen by the BLM. In this case, they kind of broke precedent and chose B, the most resource restrictive alternative. And that's basically where the problems lie. The alternative B would take 1.6 million acres into a proposed areas of critical environmental concerns, or ACECs. There are currently ACECs, they've been in place for decades, but currently in the Rock Springs Field Office, there are about 200,000 acres designated under an ACEC. So that would bring up the total to 1.8 million acres, which is about half of the 3.6 in the field office. 2.1 million acres would be closed to fluid mineral development. 3.5 million acres would be closed to coal development. 2.1 million acres would be closed to trona mining. 2.6 million acres combined under exclusion and avoidance for wind development, and 2.4 million acres excluded for rights of way. And to Senator Jones's point, even on areas that might not be excluded from any sort of development, there are additional layers that we are concerned about, whether it's surface disturbance, other constrictions on, to use an example, raptors nests, that would effectively take development out of the picture in acres that, they might show on a map as able to be developed. It was precedent breaking in how it was released to the public and how it was brought forward. A lot of the cooperator agencies, the locals, the folks who've been watching this process for the last decade, it really harm the trust that was built with folks that they work with on a day-to-day basis to see it come out without their input being taken into account. And what really disturbs the governor is that, throughout this comment period that we're currently under, it really shifts the conversation from, having the technical comments on the draft that was developed cooperatively, instead of, maybe you're avoiding a raptor's nest by a quarter mile, pushing it to a half mile, maybe it needs to be a tenth of a mile. And instead we're the conversation's been shifted to pulling this thing from the extremes more towards over that way. And, the focus is not on those technical comments to actually, tease out good policy, whether it be through conservation, development, you name it. So currently, we're in the public comment period, which, essentially everything at this point is very fluid. This is the most important part, and I do believe that in prior testimony that the BLM has given to the state legislature, they've, really thrown everybody a bone there by saying that, you focusing on the fact that comments are the most important part right now. Whether you are a cooperator agency, if you live, work, play in the area, you need to be commenting on this to be able to tell how this impacts your life, how it impacts your job, your ability to recreate. If you even being able to live in the area, the impact that your family has for living there. If that is tied to your job in the area on public lands, that's something that needs to be noted there. The NEPA process and the intake of comments is not a vote. You can have 100 folks, since they are public lands, comment period is open to the general public nationwide. It does not matter if there are 100 folks from out of state saying that they're in support of it and 100 folks from Wyoming saying that they are not. What the BLM is going to look at is the substantive comments, the ones that are backed up with data and, actually look at the numbers and what management plans are laid out in the draft. Now, obviously, like I kind of joked about earlier before, it's a 1,350-page document. 90 days is not a long time to look at it. So the governor has called for the withdrawal. He sent a letter to Tracy Stone Manning, which I believe was passed out, calling for the withdrawal of the entire RMP with the preferred alternative as one of the guardrails, the most conservation heavy, and being released to the public with a draft or with a preferred alternative that has been cooperatively developed. We see that as honestly at this point the only way forward, because there's no way to have this conversation seriously without riling up the public for what has been released, the potential that the preferred alternative could bring to the state, without having an honest conversation under a cooperatively developed alternative. So the comment deadline is November 16th. We will be requesting an extension at some point. And I'm happy to answer any questions and appreciate your time.
We have questions for, is it Mr. Rapp? Did I get it right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, questions for Mr. Rapp. Senator Jones?
Madam Co-Chair, I have a question. Is there any way of vetting the comments, or is that just strictly something BLM looks at and only for their eyes only? Is there any way that we can ensure that our comments are being counted?
Mr. Rapp, do you know?
Madam Chair, Senator Jones, I believe the comments are released on the public record. So, if they're deemed to be substantive, they're not going to directly point to a place in a final or even a draft record of decision that says, well, so many people didn't like it. But if somebody brought forward, maybe a particular comment, to use the raptor example, how much space to use in between it, they can take that into account and we'll pull, what the comment said, maybe who said it. So the substantive comments are replied to there, and we'll be able to see that later on in the process.
Follow up, or are you good? Yeah. Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Nolan, has anyone done a Reader's Digest version of the 1,350 pages to wrap up each section? I know there are various sections in there to say, here are the issues in this section, and get away from all the legalese and governmentese that they've put in there. Is that available to us?
Mr. Rapp?
Madam Co-Chair, Representative Burkhart, I would say there's quite a few articles in the media that do a pretty good job of it. Below that, it is difficult, and that's something that the state agencies and the governor's office is working on to try to compile. Because they are so layered, you can't just take, if they're diminishing animal unit months for grazing by a certain amount, that's a correct answer, but to see the impacts of what the other layers might have on it, we're still working through that.
Follow up.
Follow up? Yes, go ahead, Representative.
So Nolan, will that be done in time to circulate to the legislature so that we can make reasonable comments and that, other than just sending a letter saying, hey, I don't like this, whatever? I know how these work. You've got to be specific. They've got to answer the questions. Will that be done in time for the November 16th deadline?
Mr. Rapp?
Madam Co-Chair, Representative, we'd be happy to share the data with you as we get it. The agencies are currently, pouring through it. To use an example of what's been provided by the legislature, the FNRPA dollars, are helping go towards research and assisting the counties in compiling socioeconomic data. We're trying to get it done before the deadline of the 16th, but we're more than happy to share that with you, what we have when we have it.
Follow up, Madam
Yes, you
Chair.
bet. Go ahead,
So,
Representative.
Nolan, I would ask that you do that. I know that Senator Jones is planning to bring this up at the Minerals Committee meeting also. And I think we need to have a united front in this. So any data you can give us, I noticed some people in the audience nodding, yeah, there's a synopsis written. I'd ask those people if you could share it, that would be great with the committee, with the legislature, so that we can get that and make intelligent comments based on facts and data, not just we hate you sort of thing. Thank you.
Yes, Senator, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nolan, I'm just curious, kind of looking forward, if the BLM proceeds and, eventually in the future issues some kind of record of decision, if the governor's office has heard from the Attorney General's office about their bandwidth to proactively sue on the merits of that RMP, and if so, do we need to be thinking about, their staffing levels and their financial resources? I just think, if we've got some money, we might as well tuck it away for those legal needs in the future. So I'm curious if you have any information you can share with us.
Mr. Rapp, go ahead.
Madam Co-Chair, Senator Ellis, yes, those conversations have begun. And to use the example I used previously, FNRPA can be used with the Attorney General's office for instances just like this.
Other comments? Yes, go ahead, Representative Burkhart.
Madam Chair,
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Wanna
go
follow-
ahead.
Did you want to
Follow up.
Just to
follow
follow
up?
up.
Okay.
I know there's been some vacancies in the Water Natural Resource Division at the Attorney General's office. I see it all the time on my Wyoming Bar notifications. So I'm wondering if they are staffed up or if we need to figure out I'm just trying to make sure we're prepared. So I don't know that I've got that answer, Madam Chair.
You happen to know the answer to that, Mr.
Madam
Rapp?
Co-Chair, I would need to talk to the Attorney General's office or get the answer from them to follow up.
Okay, Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So Nolan, last session, we revised the coal litigation fund to open it up. Considering that this addresses coal and other minerals, and I think we really broadened the ability of that fund. Do you think that fund is available also for this purpose?
Mr. Rapp?
Madam Co-Chair, Representative, I would need to look into the details, be able to give a confident answer on that, but it does definitely touch on the amount of coal that's available for leasing. So it would definitely be worth looking into.
Okay, so Madam Chairman.
Yes, go
thank
ahead,
you. So
follow up.
just a statement, I think there's quite a bit of money in that account, and it was set up to handle legal issues that would affect Wyoming's mineral production. So I think I would go there and look for money there too. You may have a substantial pot of money. Thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Rapp? Yes, go ahead, Senator Jones.
Madam Co-Chair, Mr. Rapp, there's been a lot of talk about the Biden administration 30 by 30. Is that something you're familiar with? And could you explain that a little bit and how this might play into that?
Mr. Rapp, go ahead.
Madam Co-Chair, thank you, Senator Jones, for the question. Yes, the 30 by 30 initiative is to, I believe it's conserve 30% of the nation's land in 30 years. The definition on that has been light throughout the administration, but we definitely see this as a continuation of that agenda. You know, it's difficult to tie down whether, you know, they can count multiple acres because it's taken away for multiple uses. But we definitely see this as pushing forward on that agenda and, you know, not caring what it looks like on the ground to the folks that have to live with it.
Other questions or comments, Mr. Rapp? Yeah, go ahead, Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to throw in the comment, and I'll make it a question somehow, is that I want to make sure included on whatever summary we come up with. I know we talk about Rock Springs Resource Area, that actually what's included in Lincoln County and Sublette County is significant. And I want to involve these county commissioners in this conversation as well, because essentially this delineates my district. That's pretty much all of my district is what's involved in the Rock Springs resource, with the small part that's in Senator Jones, but a good portion of this is in my district. So Sublette and Lincoln and a portion of Uinta as well are significantly involved, particularly Sublette. So I want to make sure that they don't get left out in the cold and this doesn't just focus on one county, that we make sure that it's inclusive. Don't you agree?
That's great.
Madam
Mr. Rapp?
Co-Chair. Senator Baldwin, absolutely. And, you know, we've had meetings with all of the county commissioners and drawn together to make sure that, you know, we do provide that united front. Absolutely.
Just a question I have for you, Mr. Rapp. I know the governor's letter is asking for a response by October 17th, basically where he's basically saying that they would like to have an entire, you know, the agency's preferred alternative be withdrawn and another one resubmitted. Will he share the information with that, whatever response he might get back from the BLM? Will he share that with the rest of us, I assume? But again, just wondering if you knew.
Madam Chair, I'd be ecstatic to get a response, and yes, we'd be happy to share it.
Other comments? Yes, go ahead, Representative Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is going to be more of a wouldn't you agree kind of comment, but going through the maps, these maps tell a good story on what they're trying to do. And, you know, it's odd for them to call them alternatives when the off-road vehicle map is practically the same among all or the three alternatives that are presented in it. So in my opinion, I think that the state would be better off just saying, let's keep it as it is. And I'm pretty sure that that's where the governor's office is at too, but I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Mr. Rapp?
Madam Chair, Representative Larson, it's difficult to take any alternative at its face value right now because we're not at a point where any of these are solid. So, you know, depending on what ends up coming out of the other end after the public comments, then I think there will be a more strict stance. At this point, it's just, you know, pleading for the comments so that that final version does look like something closer to what we can support.
Any follow-up? No? Okay, good. I know we have some agency people here. Do you want to stick around and while we have Director Glenn come up? And I don't know, Mr. Kamiga, do you want to come as well?
Absolutely.
You may want to just hang out as well. We
Thank
may
you very
still have
much.
some more questions for you, but thank you for that. Welcome, Director.
Thank you, ma'am.
And Mr. Kaminga.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Dave Glenn, Acting Director of Wyoming State Parks and Cultural Resources. I just kind of wanted to step back a little bit because I think it's, I just want to explain our agency and kind of our role in this and others, because we traditionally get asked to comment on all kinds of things that are around state parks or involved around the outdoor recreation office or motorized trails or non-motorized trails. Traditionally, if they are just affecting parks or our agency, we write the notes, we write the comments, we check in with the governor's office, they check it off, and then we send those. On bigger projects like this, such as this resource management plan, Nolan does a phenomenal job. He gathers all the information that we submit, as well as Department of Ag and State Lands and Game and Fish and everybody else. Make sure we're looking under every single rock and moving forward. And Forrest has the majority of the information here, but I just, Carly Ann, who is sitting in the back, who you met today, mentioned something earlier, that the BLM is coming out with so many processes and so many plans right now. We don't know how these layers are going to affect each other. There's the BLM solar project in North Rock Springs. There's a BLM Rock Springs RMP. There's a blueprint for 21st century outdoor recreation. There's a new BLM rule to bolster solar and wind development, conservation and land health rule, the 30 by 30 initiative. We're still working off 12 or 13-year-old plans that are not completed with the BLM, and they're putting more plans in place, and they don't know exactly how they're going to affect each other. I think there's as many BLM processes coming out, and it's comparable to how many times people yell "Go Pokes" at a UW football game. And so that's our concern from an outdoor recreation perspective, because we don't know what one rule is going to affect the other, which take precedent. And I'll pass it on to Forrest from here on out.
Go ahead, Forrest.
Is this on? Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Forrest Kaminga, the Motorized Trails Program Manager. I first want to start out with thanking you for this opportunity to step up here and comment on this Rock Springs RMP, especially Senator Jones for reaching out and personally requesting that I be here. First off, you guys all have a document in front of you. It's kind of a preliminary observations and questions, and this was a document put together in a combined effort between the Trails Program, Trails Work Consulting, consultant agency that we keep on retainer for plans just like this, fantastic wealth of knowledge, and the ability to pick through this cumbersome 1,300-page document that not all of us have the time to just sit down and look through in one sitting, for sure. And then just a lot of internal knowledge as well from the State Parks Program or State Parks Agency, and then several employees that we have within the Trails Program. As you can tell on the document, about the first page and a half kind of touches on policy acts, past management plans. And then it gets into some specific observations, comparing the alternatives when it comes to minerals, oils, and gases, or oils and gas leases, which I would like to say doesn't really have an effect on motorized recreation, but it does. Most of those machines do run off of, they do need oil and utilize gas. So, but if you don't mind, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of jump to where I have the most expertise and how this plan, affects off-road vehicles and over snow travel. And if you jump into the kind of the area designations and you compare the existing alternative A and their preferred alternative proposed B, if you compare the acreage that they are going to allow for cross-country travel or open ride areas, those acreages don't change. So that is definitely a win when it comes to areas like the open ride area at the Kilpecker Sand Dunes. Where we do see a significant change is down in alternative B. I think it's buried in the document, like 507 pages deep, where they have a significant change in lineal mileage of designated routes and roads. Right now, they claim that there's 16,930 miles out on the red desert that is pretty, it's pretty spread out over the 3.6 million acres. In the preferred alternative, they are electing to close 10,006 miles of unauthorized routes. And then on top of that, another 4,500 miles and some change of existing designated routes, only leaving 2,352 miles of roads. When we asked for explanation on this, their explanation of these existing roads are going to be roads that you can put a blade down on. So this means complete closure of all 2 tracks and any opportunity for any type of motorized trail, whether that's single track, with restricted trails, or just 2-track roads that everyone from, everyone uses for hunting or any other type of access, including primitive uses. So from there, I would also, Mr. Rapp did a fantastic job, so avoid redundancy, I think I'm gonna go ahead and skip over the special designations and the management areas, the ACECs that he was referring to. To, kind of just touch on it a little bit, the percentages that we calculated is that they're gonna have a 460% increase on protected area out in the Red Desert. So that's a huge increase in what they're gonna manage on, or critical environmental concerns. The other thing is special recreation management areas. In their preferred alternatives, they have planned to eliminate 100% of these recreational management areas, which is a double-edged sword because then we don't have any protections for those. When it comes to the motorized trails program, one of those special recreation management areas is the Continental Divide Snowmobile Trail on the north end of the north end of this district. There wouldn't be a protection to ensure that that remains intact. And then the Kilpecker Sand Dunes as well, which is a very popular very popular open ride area. So going from there, the next area of concern for the trails program is over the snow vehicle travel. They have absolutely nothing in this document that explains how they're going to manage over the snow vehicle travel. They do have a little bit in the document that refers to the Continental Divide Snowmobile Trail and how they're going to designate that for over the snow travel, but what are they gonna do with the remaining 3.6 million acres? Are they gonna allow for it? Are they gonna close it completely off to it? We would just like to see this document, explain a little bit more in depth. Maps would be great. There's absolutely nothing in that document. So, other than that, the last thing I'm gonna touch on that directly impacts off-highway vehicles and over the snow vehicles is they did in the preferred alternative, they are going to not allow for any special use permitting for any type of rallies, events, endurance races. So that means if they want to have a endurance race across the Red Desert, permitting won't be allowed to make it happen. So, from there, I think the only other thing I would like to touch on, since I have the opportunity to sit in front of you, is since I've sat in front of you, there's been a significant change in faces up there. So I provided just a kind of a 2-page document. I believe it was handed out. It's just an explanation of how the Trails program is funded and what we spend that funding on. And if an RMP were to pass if this RMP were to pass as written, it would be detrimental to the motorized community and the economic values it brings in. So from there, I'd field any questions that anyone might have.
Questions for Mr. Kaminga? Senator, go ahead.
Madam Co-Chair, Mr. Kaminga, can you tell me, it referenced a map and of the trails and stuff and the 10,000 miles that it looks like we're facing to lose access to. Do you guys know of the map, or do you have a map that we can distribute?
Mr.
Madam
Kaminga?
Chair, Senator Jones, we do not. We have not even figured out what type of criteria they used to come up with the 10,000 miles, where they came up with the 16,630 miles. There's absolutely very little explanation. What explanation we did get was it was a mistake. It shouldn't have been in the document, and they're going to revise that document and make sure it gets pulled out. But at this point, our question is, well, it is in there. Obviously, there was some time and effort put into some type of road inventory to come up with those. I mean, they're pretty exact to the mileages. There's no estimations in there.
Other questions for Mr. Kaminga? Yes, go ahead, follow up. Senator Jones?
It's a new one, actually, Madam Co-Chair. Mr. Kaminga, we've worked really hard on this committee for the SWAT program and trying to create this in Southwest Wyoming for tourism. And can you tell us how this would impact that program and those trails that we've been working on?
Mr. Kamiga?
Madam Chair and Senator Jones, how it would impact the SWAT program is, I mean, it would concentrate where they, or what routes would be available for them to use in their big picture. And their big picture is to, of course, connect the southwest corner of the state to the northeast corner of the state. It would concentrate that use specifically on the only routes that they would be able to use is that 2,352 miles of road. That wouldn't necessarily be a off-road trail experience.
Other questions? I have one for you. They talked a little bit about, well, on the pamphlet you prepared, or someone prepared, talked about primitive, what they want to do is provide more primitive recreation experiences. I'm just wondering, do they mean like wilderness, that you can only walk in to get to these experiences? I mean, what are they saying there?
That is, Madam Chair, that's a very good question. And I don't want to speak on behalf of the BLM, but the one thing I will say is if there is no road available to get there, 3.6 million acres is a very vast section of land. So if you don't have a road infrastructure to access those, it's going to be pretty tough to hike 40 miles into some of your favorite places.
Other questions for Mr. Kamiga?
Madam Chair.
Oh,
if I
yes,
may.
go ahead, Mr. Rapp.
Yeah, just to add on to his point there, that's where they would be technically telling the truth that, no public lands are actually taken away from hunters, fishers, or hikers, but the access is extremely limited to get there. So someone might look at a different field office that's, taking tourism and other dollars away from, that area. So those are, kind of the layers that have to be added on that need to be analyzed through this, and why we, implore those folks, the SWAT folks, the hunters, who might use a 2-track to get out there to comment on this draft to let them know how this would impact them, and any data that they might have for tourism, visiting, any kind of dollar spent in the area for those purposes be very important to know and to note in the draft.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I noticed Mr. Harrington has just popped in, and yeah, I'd love to hear from State Trails. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Patrick Harrington, Manager of the Wyoming Office of Outdoor Recreation. It's good to see the committee. I have a few brief points. As Nolan said, we've all been poring over this 1,300-page document, and a few surface level things that have come up. Obviously, we'll refine this to some degree as well. But the committee has heard today about there's no special recreation management areas, and the committee has also heard both myself and Director Glenn say dozens of times in front of this committee that we work on a process we call EDC, which is Educate, Disperse, and Concentrate. And really the goal there is to educate users out across the state, to disperse them away from those areas of greatest concern, and then to concentrate them into landscapes that can really support them. And that's foundational in the outdoor recreation office's sort of ethos and how we want to develop recreation assets in the state. And so we see some concerns with this in that without these special recreation management areas, it's pushing all recreation towards dispersed recreation, which is part of what we all love about our public lands. But as we see incredible increases in visitation, the numbers in this plan are pre-2015 for visitation, and we know what's happened since 2015, and particularly on these federal public lands. But we have concerns, the example that you guys will have all heard, if we're talking the Red Desert and we're talking about camping in the Red Desert, and there's one spring for 20 miles around, the first place the camper is going to want to go is to that spring, because it may also be the only tree for 20 miles around. But what that does is have obvious consequences to wildlife in the area. Both, we could talk sage grouse, we could talk mule deer or elk and their migration corridors through the area. This has obviously been a topic of conversation as we've discussed the trust fund in this committee, is these impacts to wildlife. And so this runs counter to our goals with outdoor recreation in the state, and we think we can do better given better tools. We've also worked with several of you, and thanks to you for joining our outdoor recreation collaboratives. But what those have demonstrated is that both in communities on the southern end of the Red Desert and on the northern end in Fremont and Sweetwater County, and then some in Sublette as well, is real strong recreation tied to their economies. And even more, as we look forward, a real desire to grow recreation economies as a way to diversify their local, county, or community economies. We could see this having some significant impacts, not only in the ability to develop, but just in undercutting that economy sort of as it sits now levels. And then the last thing I'll mention, and this I still will need to do some more work on to figure out exactly what the impacts are. But Alternative B lists the South Pass Historic Landscape, ACEC. There are currently plans and some development of trails adjacent to that state historic site. And so I think we've sort of red flagged that as a potential for impacts of that current ongoing development in that area, as we see it largely positive. And so with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Questions for Mr. Harrington? Yes, go ahead, Senator Ellis.
Thank you. Just a quick question of how you're going to get those comments submitted. Are you doing it through the governor's office, or is yourself as a standalone agency? I'm just trying to figure out what's going to have the most impact, because that's what ultimately, if they proceed and issue a record of decision, like those sound like really helpful comments in an administrative record for a court to look at. So I just want to make sure I'm looking for them.
Yeah.
Mr. Harrington?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And Senator Ellis, appreciate the question. Mr. Rapp and I were just talking in the breezeway right before we came in here. We'll be coordinating with the governor's office, submitting our comments through them, or at the very least following their lead.
Madam Co-Chair, if I
Oh,
may
yes,
add
go
on
ahead.
to that. A lot of the agencies have those subject matter experts on this. So we tend to rely on the agencies for those subject matter experts for the, more specific comments. The governor will always send a comment letter as well. I wouldn't go so far as to call it a cover letter, but just, basically hitting the highlights to draw certain attention to the most important points that each agency brings up. And this is especially for this RMP, this is an all-of-state approach.
Follow up? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One person or one entity I don't see in the audience right now is Game and Fish. And so I'm kind of curious how that conversation's going with that agency.
Go ahead, Mr. Rabb.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Game and Fish has been very involved since the very beginning. I believe they will be testifying in front of the Federal Natural Resource Committee on Friday up in Casper. I'll be there as well. But they're going to have some of the most major concerns out of any of the agencies, especially considering migration corridors, and it's looking a lot like the federal preemption of our wildlife management.
Other comments? No? Other questions? All right. Thank you so much for all of your testimony. And I do think we might open it up for the public in the room. And then I think we also have a couple people on Zoom possibly. Well, let's go ahead, and anybody in the room that would like to testify, come on up. And who wants to go first? Who's here first,
Chairwoman,
I
if you don't
guess?
mind, I've got to get a couple of boys to baseball practice.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and start with you, Mr. Freeman.
Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee, I'm Jeremiah Riemann here on behalf of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. I wanted to just provide a little bit of support in this from our world. First, maybe the only individual in this room that was at the very first Rock Springs RMP Cooperator meeting, representing the state through the governor's office at that point in time. So got a lot of personal history with this, and I'm disappointed to see the turn it has taken. For those that don't know, in relationship to counties, county commissioners and their staff sit as cooperating agencies, just like the governor's office and the state agencies. It's a power that you've granted to us through state statute, and we get to represent the special expertise that we have of the culture, history, and other elements of local economies. And to that end, a couple of things. One, through your appropriations and the governor's office's generosity through the years, starting with Governor Friedenthal, we've been able to host a natural resource attorney in our office that represents all 23 of the counties. And so that individual, Micah Christensen, he too will be making some comments later this week. He will sit down with the commissioners in the regions that are affected, both throughout the process, but certainly during these times as we begin to analyze those 1,300 pages and work with the governor's office, work with other stakeholders that are sitting to my right, and formulate comments from the local level. So we're very appreciative of having that resource in our office. I will say that this process has also made us wonder whether we shouldn't enhance that capability at our office, not just to have legal counsel. And I should say, we typically don't use that legal counsel for litigation. This is somebody that just helps counties work through the legal elements of all this sort of planning. Now, we're prepared to assist the state in litigation, but that's not our first front with that particular position. But again, this process has certainly made us wonder whether we shouldn't have some additional technical expertise, somebody that can dig in more into the agricultural, energy, mineral, whatever the particular issues are, that we can then enhance the capabilities of not only counties, but the state in this process. The other place where you've helped us and that will help us in this process is just a few years ago when I first came into this position, you afforded counties $50,000 each to go through their own natural resource plans to make sure that those were solid and could express their particular perspectives and desires for the community, and that could be a backstop through the NEPA process. I'm very happy that nearly every county took advantage of that particular opportunity. And again, we will utilize that through this process, not only in commenting on the draft, but there will be a governor's consistency review, because this is a resource management plan. That is a tool that the governor will have. It's not a veto authority, but it certainly gives the state a larger hammer in this process and requires the agency to provide in the Federal Register their response of why they didn't ultimately adhere to what the governor and state plans might say. And we're certainly hopeful that the governor's office will allow us to participate in that consistency review process as it moves forward. In the short term, commissioners did meet last week. You may have seen that a number of them have sent letters of their own requesting the withdrawal, and that's counties like Niobrara and Weston and others that see from their far reaches of Wyoming how this could impact them, and how if we allow this to continue, that it could impact them as processes move to their particular region. We are also meeting with the governor's office, I believe, next week, and continuing our coordination as we prepare our own comments and assist the counties in the process. I'm not the guy to be able to provide the technical elements of this. I wish I could get Micah here for you, but he will be there later this week for those that are going to be at that Select Federal Natural Resource Management Committee, and he can certainly answer them there. With that, Madam Chairwoman, I just want to make sure that I express that we are actively involved in this and will be till the end. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions that you might have.
Questions for Mr. Riemann? I have just one. You said you're one of the early cooperators when they first started working on this plan. Did you get the feeling at that time that alternative B was the preferred option, or had they talked about A, B, C, and D at that time?
Madam Chairwoman, we weren't even developing alternatives at that time. It was beginning to do the scoping process and work into that. I will say that later meetings, of which I was a part and got to supervise other staff that were involved, it was a much more collaborative, cooperative process and headed towards, I think, other alternatives that would have been akin to what we saw ultimately come forward in the other half dozen or so resource management plans that I was working on at that time. Alternative B was a complete departure, I think, from where everybody thought that this was headed.
Other comments or questions? Mr. Freeman? Don't see any. Well, thanks so much for taking the time. Good luck with baseball practice.
Thanks.
Getting them there on time, you know. If the dads don't get them there on time, you know, that's, you know what happens. Appreciate your time. Mr. McGagna, would you like to be next?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jim McGagin with the Wyoming Stockgrowers Association. As you might expect, we're focused in this primarily from its impact on livestock grazing, but share the broader concerns that have been expressed. I shared a document with you here that I had gone through the alternative B, the proposed or the preferred alternative, and just made a list of everything that was in there that would negatively over time impact livestock grazing. I came up with 25 items, which you'll see on that bulleted list there. And it's interesting, the first one says, well, 7,600 animal units of grazing will be removed. That's the least of our concerns. There are over 200,000 animal units of grazing in the Rock Springs resource area, and we can deal with those. It's that all of these others, not on the day the document is signed, but over a period of time, will result in restriction on livestock grazing till we anticipate we would see it largely fade away within that region, which is critical. And you know, they control the federal lands, but because of the land ownership patterns, in effect with a document like this, they control what the future use of the intermingled state trust lands and private lands are as well. So at this point, we have followed the lead of the governor and we have submitted our comments urging a withdrawal and a reissuance, not a rewriting of the whole document, but a reissuance with a different preferred alternative. That's one that gives us all an opportunity to provide meaningful input. The problem with alternative B that's out there right now is preferred is, all we can say we look at it is there's nothing in there that we can defend. We just have to be solidly opposed to it. And typically in these resource planning processes, and I've been through many of them, they'll issue documents, positions represent the two extremes, but then they'll have a couple in the middle that all sides can develop a comfort level with. We'll have some things we like, we'll have some things we may not like. So that's what we're faced with here at this point in time. But the impacts would be tremendous over there on the ranching industry, as I've outlined here. And our approach has been to first ask for the withdrawal, reissuance. If that is not given, and I'd be pleased if it is, but I'm not overly optimistic, by the deadline set by the governor of October 17th, then we will ask for an extension of the comment period for reasons that have already been explained to you. And at that point, then begin to develop all of our specific objections to the plan, but they will be based on this list of impacts here that I've provided out of there. And just not to go through all of these, but just a broad overview. There are restrictions on the use of the land, the restrictions on roadways, obviously our ability to use those lands, we've got to have access to them. There's virtually a prohibition of predator control in the ACECs, which is nearly half of the entire area. That's critical for us. Restrictions on improvements or even maintenance of existing improvements. We're dependent on wells, reservoirs, fences, everything that exists in that area. All of those would affect us. So it's just such a broad array that it's not one or two things that we can accommodate as we're used to doing, but rather the combination of those and how they would impact us. The other thing that I feel compelled to mention in that line is that when we look at something like this, we have to look not only at how the BLM sees it working, but how others will see it working. And there are a couple of, not based in Wyoming, but elsewhere, groups out there whose pronounced goal is to eliminate all livestock grazing on public lands. Well, each one of these things, if BLM doesn't just fall into the line, each one represents litigation that will be filed over time that will challenge our livestock grazing, and litigation that the BLM can't defend if they haven't just literally followed every detail that's in here. So that's all important to us. Just one other thing on a more personal basis I would mention, my entire ranch lies within this area and within the proposed ACEC. So everything that I have, including my ranch headquarters, my private land, would be within an ACEC. I read to think about what that may mean, but on another note, and I've shared this message with the National BLM Director, 2023 happens to be my 60th anniversary. It's the 60th anniversary of my beginning relationship with the Rock Springs office of the BLM. In 1944, I started working with them as a grazing permittee. When I took over my family ranch, in 60 years, we've had generally a good relationship. We haven't agreed on everything. We've found things to disagree about. We've worked our way around them. Part of the reason it's worked is because those local people who have knowledge of the resource have had the freedom to make some decisions, work some compromises out that were in the best interest of the conservation of the land. What a document like this does, if it's adopted as proposed, is it takes away that freedom. And you no longer have the ability to work these things out. And I was very honest in telling them that if this alternative B is adopted as it's proposed, that 60-year relationship as of that date has come to an end. And with that, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to field any questions.
Questions for Mr. Magagna? Senator Jones?
Madam Co-Chair, Mr. Magagna, I'm going to keep asking this to everybody, but have you seen the map on the roads and trails that they plan on closing? I mean, it sounds like it could be detrimental to the ranching industry as well.
Mr.
Madam
Magagna?
Chair, Senator Jones, I have not seen a map. I've only seen the description of the mileage involved, but being very familiar with most of the country in that district, you can't close that many miles of road without dramatically impacting the ranching community there that depends on most of those roads. In fact, the two-track roads, which would be closed, most of those roads were originally created by ranchers because that's what we needed to get around and run our ranching operations.
Other questions for Mr. Magagna? I just have one. I was just scanning through your bullet list here, where they mention they'll allow animal damage control on BLM land only if it would benefit special status species or is needed for valid safety concerns. What are they saying there?
They're basically saying, Madam Chair, that we would not be able to do any predator control work because our livestock are being attacked by wolves or coyotes or whatever the species may be, that predator control would only be authorized if it was to protect a species that's either on an endangered species list or a species of conservation concern, which is a list of species that the BLM maintains that hasn't made it to the under the Endangered Species Act yet, but that they are providing protections for.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes, go ahead,
Madam Chair,
Representative
thank you.
Byron.
Mr. Magagna, can you speak to that a little bit more and how that might run into direct conflict with how Wyoming manages their wildlife?
Mr. Magagna?
Madam Chair, Representative Byron, you know, the animal damage control work that is done, certainly it's done a lot of it to protect livestock, but it's also critical to wildlife. And particularly with wolves and that, they have a significant impact. So as I read this, unless a population of a particular species, say it's whatever that may be, you pick antelope or whatever you want, reach the decline to the point that the BLM would declare it to be a species of particular concern, no animal damage control would be allowed on behalf of that species.
Okay, thank you. I think Representative Burkhart has a question for you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Magagna, would it be safe to say, and this is a two-part question, that in effect, the BLM is declaring a large swath of Wyoming as a wilderness area? And do you think that is leading to creation of the infamous Buffalo Commons?
Mr.
Madam
Magagna?
Chairman, Representative Burkhart, I think that's a very good observation. It brings another thing to my mind that I have looked at personally, I have no proof of it. As some of you may be aware, maybe perhaps you all are, Wyoming is one of only two states in the nation, Wyoming and Alaska, where the president lacks the authority to create national monuments. And our current president has been creating them throughout the West. Utah, Nevada, Arizona have all seen some. One recently talked about to Oregon. The president can't do that in Wyoming. And I look at such a massive increase in areas of critical environmental concern. And in my mind say, is this a way that they're trying to accomplish what they accomplish in national monuments in every other state? And so I think all of that fits. And if you read, and we've all worked with ACECs over the years, tend to be smaller acreages that have very unique characteristics, and that's what they've protected. Now, the other thing that is worth keeping in mind, in my view, the other document that came out several months ago, that it's mostly referred to as conservation leasing. I'm sure you've heard about that. But a second part of that one deals with ACECs, and it expands the scope of what would become an ACEC. That rule is not in place yet. It's still in the developmental stages, but in my view, what they're proposing here on ACECs is really kind of using that proposed rule or the criteria that it has established before it's even been finalized.
Follow up? Nope. Okay, good. Any other questions for Mr. McGagnon? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. We appreciate the extra information. Thank you. All right, Ms. Johnson, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Jess Johnson, Wyoming Wildlife Federation, and I'll keep this very brief. I wanted to reach out and say that we have a set of talking points and run-throughs for what each of these alternatives looks like and does for wildlife from the hunting perspective. And we are finalizing them currently, but as soon as that we have the sign-off of the sportsmen's groups and the other entities that are involved with that, we will send it your way so you can look through it. The other thing I wanted to stress, and this is writing on what Senator Jones had mentioned earlier, is the importance of the comment period here and how absolutely vital it is that we get these comments in. But I also wanted to add a clarification in the sense that you do not have to pick an alternative. You don't have to say it's all alternative B, all alternative C, or all alternative D. You can pick and choose pieces of these alternatives, things that you like about one, you don't like about the other, and you can create a mosaic of what these look like and offer that as a solution. You also, if none of these alternatives cover what you think needs to happen in these areas, you can create your own and offer them in the comments. It is not set that you have to pick an alternative. So I wanted to make sure that that was stressed there, because this is where the collaborative part comes in. You know, I know that is where WWF will be going. We will be picking a mosaic of these. We will not be picking one or the other. And I just wanted to kind of offer that as a clarification, and then make sure that you know that we will send the sporting talking points that we have your way.
Questions for Ms. Johnson? Oh, yes, go ahead, Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I heard you say in your opening remark, you want to talk about what these plan amendments, and some of the alternatives, what they do for wildlife, which made me think that sounded like there were things in there you support. And so I'm kind of curious to know what you're looking at, or how your group is kind of, through what lens you're looking at these alternatives.
Ms. Johnson?
Certainly, we're looking at them as, you know, what it does for wildlife, but it's through the hunting voice. So there's, you know, whether it's access concerns, whether it's not access concerns, whether it's migration corridors, you know, we're certainly looking at this. Since we have not come out with a formal stance, don't feel comfortable in sharing that yet. I am working in front of you guys, but not the policy designee for this RMP. But I wanted to make sure that I shared sort of the opportunity with the comments. I can tell you as soon as we have our formal stance, I can also send that along with you. It should be out in the next day or two.
Other questions for Ms. Johnson? Okay, thanks again for your testimony. We
Thank
look
you.
forward to that. So, anyone else in the room that would like to testify? Welcome. Even though we know you, go ahead and please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My name is Travis McNevin here, just as an individual citizen of the state today. As I think about our federal lands and the large amount of federal land that's in Wyoming, and in working in these areas in the past, the Federal Land Management Policy Act, which governs the BLM, offers coordination status to the state agencies, and then to the county commissioners. And then, since we're in a legislative meeting here today, in my mind, one of the most useful and helpful things that the state legislature can do is to, obviously, there's a role of education and outreach and, hosting meetings and such that is going on today. But that is to make sure that the coordinating, the coordinating agencies have the proper funding and expertise where they do have that role at the table for whether it's, Forest Service or BLM or any sort of other land management, that the counties do have those land management plans that are up to date, that they do have that expertise that, some counties do and some counties have not as much. And so in my mind, this is a good reminder statewide for all counties, for all areas, for all areas that do have federal land, the importance of making sure that the expertise and the funding for that, so that the counties and the governor's office and the agencies can perform that cooperating and coordinating roles that FLPMA and then the National Forest Management Act actually call out for them to participate in. And with that, I would just simply take any questions.
Questions for Mr. McNiven? Oh, I don't see any. Thank you so much for your testimony. Appreciate it. I think we have a couple of folks on Zoom, if there's nobody else in the room. All right. Should we start with Taylor Jones? Let's go ahead and start with Taylor Jones. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Taylor Jones, County Commissioner in Sweetwater County. Would like to go over a few things. I'll try and stick to the document itself as much as possible. Try and go in order as much as possible, but you make a comment about one portion of the document and it tends to bounce you to other portions of the document. So for today, I'll try and keep most of my comments to the recreation side of things. Would like to mention that the County Commissioners of Sweetwater County have issued letters requesting the withdrawal similar to the governor and also the extension. So we are on the same page there. A few things some things have been brought up here earlier, and I've been working on myself. The question of the map keeps coming up. I've requested numerous times for a map from the BLM. That's crickets. There is no response. Something to be noted about the map and the paragraph in there about closing 10,000 miles. I think it's very important to realize that means there is a map. They have a map and they absolutely have done an inventory of their roads. There's no way that you can possibly come up with these numbers and not have a map and not have an inventory. County of Sweetwater has a map, and our map shows in the neighborhood of 33,000 miles of roads and trails in Sweetwater County. It's not an exact number. We're not exact yet, quite like the BLM has been. But the point I want to make is there's 33,000 miles of roads and trails currently, and they plan to leave 2,500 roughly open. Pretty substantial decrease, roughly 30,000 miles of roads and trails in one county that they will close. They don't have specific language about the change in what they call a road. It used to be existing, now it's designated. As Mr. Kamingas commented earlier, I received one explanation that he did, which means the designated road is something they'll put a blade to. Another one I've received is if there's a sign and it's marked. Regardless, it's a severe cut in access to public lands. That translates into a tremendous cut in revenues for Sweetwater County and in turn the state of Wyoming. Representative Burkhart, I know you'll appreciate this one particular line that's in there. It mentions that oil and gas will be reduced by 74%. 74%. That's their document. That's what it says. It's nothing I'm making up. It comes straight from them. Would like to mention on the ORV side of things, there's about 3,400 ORVs that have purchased the registration sticker in Sweetwater County. There are about 2,400 that are actually licensed with a plate. Those things side by sides can easily cost $30,000 a piece. Do a little simple math, you can get upwards of $100 million in side by sides in Sweetwater County. That doesn't count gas, doesn't count parts, doesn't count accessories, doesn't count a variety of different things. So this is a big deal. It's not just a few guys out there in side by sides. Some of the portions of the document that I'd like to read, again, this comes directly from the document, so it's not my opinion, it's fact. Alternative B, D, this is in case you're wondering, chapter 4, volume 1, page 260. Alternative B de-emphasizes recreation, particularly developed recreation. For instance, no SRMAs would be retained in alternative B areas for OHV rallies, cross-country races, and other organized events would not be provided. Mr. Kaminga mentioned that earlier. Also says consumer surplus values for OHV uses would decrease because areas of OHV rallies, cross-country races, other organized events would not be provided. And areas could be immediately closed where OHVs are causing or will cause considerable adverse effects upon a wide range of resources. That's about as vague and general as you can get. But basically what it does is opens the door for them to close any road, any trail, anytime for virtually any reason. All somebody has to do from BLM is say, that rut's a little bit too deep and we're closing it. Another paragraph, these are on page 261 of chapter 4. This alternative B would also provide the greatest support to other non-use values. For instance, such values related to open space would be maintained through lower levels of extractive resource development, substantially higher acreage of right-of-way exclusion areas, and other actions. So all of this language goes towards the exclusion of OHV and recreation and access to public lands. The comments, like to touch on the comments a little bit. Yes, they have to be quality comments. I think we all understand that. I'm not really sure the general public is educated on that. So my fear is the majority of the people will not have input comments that the BLM will deem substantive. At the meeting in Rock Springs, they had comment papers there for people to fill out, which on the surface seems nice. However, the problem with it is if people haven't read the 1,400-page document yet, which they probably haven't, I don't know anybody who has, then they show up for a 3-hour meeting with the BLM. They're supposed to understand this document in 3 hours and fill out a substantive comment. Not going to happen. So they've set us up for failure in a variety of different directions. There was some question about whether or not this document would return us for more wilderness areas. The document actually refers to returning areas to its natural state. Natural state is beyond wilderness. Natural state is no human activity. That's the only way you can have land, as far as I know. The only way you can have land in its natural state is if it's not touched. So the document is headed in that direction. I will say, in reviewing a bunch of these points with our constituents, the majority of them prefer alternative A. The biggest question they've been asking is what's wrong with what we're doing now? Nobody can seem to answer that other than we need to do this review because it's time. A comment on the question about SWAT and whether or not that would be affected. There's a very good possibility that that type of activity would be completely shut down depending on the right-of-ways and what roads and trails would be closed or what would be open of the 2,500 miles of the 33,000 that are available today. So the closures could very well make it impossible to physically travel from one county or one town to another. The document really is lacking a lot of details. It's very hard to pin them down. There will be lines in there where it will say areas can be open for access. That doesn't mean it will be open for access. It just means it can. Another thing that is really disturbing is how they have the BLM that is completely disregarded our Sweetwater County Federal Lands and Resource Plan. Under recreation and tourism in our plan, it talks about Sweetwater County supports outdoor recreation on federal land as part of a balanced plan of economic growth and quality of life and consistent with recreation as one of the primary multiple uses of public lands. This document will not allow for that. Next paragraph, Sweetwater County believes that federal land management agencies should achieve and maintain traditional access to outdoor recreational opportunities available on federal lands as follows: hunting, trapping, fishing, hiking, camping, rock hounding, OHV travel, biking, geological exploring, pioneering, recreational vehicle camping, and sightseeing. The document does not allow for that. It will severely restrict it. The broad spectrum of outdoor recreational activities available on federal land should be available to citizens for whom a primitive, non-motorized outdoor experience is not preferred, affordable, or physically achievable. The document works very hard to eliminate that. The county supports existing levels of motorized public access to traditional outdoor recreational designations in the county must be continued, including both snow machine and OHV. We heard earlier that it removes snow machine. There is actually a portion in there where they talk about 8-inch snow depth. There's no science behind that. It's a random number. It means nothing. It doesn't talk about what kind of snow, fresh, packed, anything like that, just 8 inches. So again, another example of them lacking documentation. I'll stop with that because I could go on forever and I could go over the other portions that I've read and highlighted for my own use that negatively impact Sweetwater County and how it will destroy our economy and our way of life. I don't have the Reader's Digest version. I just have the pages that I've read and highlighted. So I apologize that I don't have that. Maybe I'll find time if I ever get through this document. So with that, I will stop and stand for any questions.
Questions for Commissioner Jones? Go ahead, Representative Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's more of a comment. Commissioner Jones, he was just appointed as one of our new county commissioners due to Lauren Scheinfeld stepping down for the governor's office. And I just appreciate all the hard work he's done on this and our whole commission as well. So thanks, Taylor.
Thank you.
Other questions for the new commissioner? I just have one for you. I assume you were at the meeting in Rock Springs. And I don't know, I had kind of a bad taste in my mouth because I heard the same thing from the folks in Bridger Valley, that it didn't really seem like a meeting where there was an awful lot of, what's the word I want to say, collaboration. The comments, I guess, you could write those comments down, but I guess I felt like it maybe should have been more like an open house where you could have comments and we could hear from them. And again, when I walked in and saw the numbers of people over there, I was kind of shocked. But what was your take on the whole thing based on what you saw and what you heard?
Madam Chair, thank you. Yes, I was there. I was there before the meeting started. I think we were in line at about 2:40 when the meeting started at 3, and I don't believe I got in my car till about 7 o'clock. So I was talking to a lot of people. Yeah, it was technically, yes, they had a meeting. Technically, yes, information was there. It was incomplete information. It depended on who you talked to as whether or not, as to what story you got. You could get different information from the same station where they would have different people speaking. So it was very frustrating. It was very hard to try and understand the document. I've read a fair amount of it, not all of it, but I think I have at least somewhat of a reasonable understanding. And that's why it dawned on me, for the person who hasn't read the document to walk into that room and get in that situation, it's first of all incredibly overwhelming. Second of all, how are you ever going to understand a 1,400 page document in 3 hours? It took them 12 years to put it together. And the general public is supposed to understand and make quality comments in 3 hours? That's just completely disingenuous, in my opinion.
Thank you. Other comments or questions, the Commissioner? Okay. Thank you for what you're doing. Appreciate it. Thanks for your testimony today.
Thank you for your time.
We also have Mr. Bingham from Sweetwater County. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my name is Eric Bingham. I'm the Sweetwater County Land Use Director, and thank you for listening to me. I've been working for Sweetwater County since 2004. And so I've been through, we had actually an employee completely dedicated to the as a cooperator, because as you know, Sweetwater County was a cooperator in the process. Needless to say, we were very shocked when we heard the alternative. Personally, I hadn't heard from the Bureau of Land Management since 2020. That was the last comment that came from Sweetwater County. So we had no correspondence or anything. And then all of a sudden, we focused a lot on what was alternative D, as in dog. And a lot of our comments went towards that. Was supposed to be a compromise between alternative B and C. And we're very shocked when they went to this alternative. And just to touch a little bit on Commissioner Jones, what he stated, we, through FNRPA funds, through the governor's office, did take advantage of that, and we're able to do a Sweetwater County Federal Lands and Resource Plan. When you look at the document, there was no reference to that as all in the resource management plan. One thing that I'm working on right now is comments for Sweetwater County. One thing that I'm finding is the document is not in compliance with BLM manuals and 43 Code of Federal Regulations. We're finding a lot of discrepancies in there, and that's what Sweetwater County is focusing on right now. I did speak with the commissioners yesterday regarding our focus, and similar to what Mr. Rapp had stated, that there's issues with all of the alternatives, and that's what we're finding as we go through the document. The areas of critical environmental concern were they didn't follow that process properly. And so we're finding that also. And, not to hammer too much more, people have gone over the areas of critical environmental concern, but just wanted to share with the committee that that's what we're focusing on right now in Sweetwater County. That's all I have, Madam Chair. Real brief.
Thank you, Mr. Bingham. Any questions from the committee for Mr. Bingham? Well, thank you so much. We appreciate you taking the time. I know it's been a long day for some folks anyway, but we appreciate everything that you've testified to today, and thanks so much for taking the time. Committee, what's your pleasure with this? I think maybe Senator Jones has something she'd like to say.
Madam Co-Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we draft a letter, something similar to what the governor had to say, and ask him to withdraw this plan entirely.
We have a second? Okay, we have a second from Representative Larson. Any discussion on this? Yes, go ahead.
I think we also need to make sure that we ask for that public comment extension in the letter. And maybe the letter could be geared towards, if this is favorable, towards the travel committee, what we deal with recreation, and similar to what Ag did, they talked about kind of their realm of things. And then I'm sure we'll, I can't speak for the minerals committee, but I'm sure we'll be discussing something like that in that committee as well. So,
any other discussion? I think that's a great idea, and I'm happy to help that together with whomever would like to help. I'm guessing maybe the folks from Rock Springs would probably want to get it started ASAP, correct? Okay, let's go ahead and take a vote. All those in favor of a letter of support from our travel committee, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Okay, that motion has passed. We'll get started on that. I'll get in touch with you guys. And anybody else who would like to chime in on that letter, Bill? Yes, go ahead, Representative Winter.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I guess one question I had, does Senator Grew have anything to say?
Good idea. Senator Grew, do you want to chime in on the letter or the motion? I don't know if you voted even.
I did. I thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Representative Winter. I couldn't agree more with the sentiments that have been expressed here, and hope that, and I think that JT had a great, suggestion to tailor the comments from a travel recreation point of view, as other committees have kind of tailored their comments from their different disciplines, and I think that would be the most effective. I'd like to say I did support the motion and agree wholeheartedly, and look forward to the document, and will work as hard as I can to bring forth those elements to folks that I can. So thanks.
Good. Thank you, Senator. Representative Winter?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. There's been a lot of good information come out of this meeting today, but I just wanted to bring up a couple of other items that have come to my attention. We've been talking about federal lands here, and with this 30-30 land grab that the Biden administration is proposing, private lands are not out of the woods on this. And specifically, these conservation easements that are continually being sold, it's my understanding that the federal government is offering way more money than for these easements than what is normal. And the one thing that a person, if he's going to get it easy, sell an easement, he needs to make sure it's not in perpetuity, because if they get a hold of it in that regard, they're going to be controlling it. Also, the waters of the U.S. is another item that has not been spoken about today, but it's really a big deal. It'll really affect farmland throughout the country. And also, this 30-30 program is going to escalate to the 40-40 and the 50-50. So it's just the beginning. And we just need to really be on the alert here. I know the folks in my part of the state, they're really concerned about it. The Worland District has just completed their program up there, as this deal like Rock Springs is doing. And that can change really quick. If this goes through, all these other districts are going to be redoing their plans as well. So we all need to be on the alert and try to pass this along as much as we can to our other citizens in the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead, Representative Byron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also think it's important to potentially involve for those people that were volunteered to write or draft this letter to maybe give some input to Game and Fish. I'm thinking about the agriculture industry and how they're going their direction. TRW, I think, as Mr. McGagna pointed out, it's really important because this is a direct attack on how we enjoy our public lands. And not only that, but how great the Game and Fish is at managing our wildlife. And he hinted at it a little bit, but I think that maybe reaching out to that department and seeing if they want to add somebody to that letter writing committee, if you will, because this is somewhere that many of us have enjoyed hunting privileges, and it's been a really important part of how we grew up. And I think that we'd be remiss not to involve them. So as you guys begin to draft that, I just think it'd be worth reaching out to that agency, and really hitting on the economic impacts that this situation certainly has on, potentially has on all of Wyoming and all of the West and all of the nation.
Good point. Yes, Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and a slight correction to Representative Byron, and I've said this before. While we look at these as public lands for us to access and enjoy in a number of ways, the BLM and the other federal agencies look at them as federal lands that they own, they control, and that they're theirs, not for the public, but for whatever they want to do. And just, I think we all need to be aware of that that's the difference between us and them. You know, and I can think of some other things to put in the letter, which I know this is going out publicly, so I won't say them, but I think you can imagine what my comments would be. And we'll consider those at the November Minerals Committee meeting.
I think those are all good comments. And one thing I would just suggest, and I would kind of maybe put Senator Jones in charge of getting this started, but I think that we need to go back and look at the mission of the BLM and make sure that we talk about the fact that their mission statement says that these lands are multiple use for the maximum sustained yield that they can have. And that's really, if that's their mission, then we need to basically talk a little bit about how important multiple use is for these lands. And so I would hope that we would make that a point of emphasis as well, but all good comments. And anything else from the committee? We've had a really great day today. The tours were wonderful. It seemed like a full day, but at least we weren't here all day long in this room, but tomorrow we will be. And anything, Madam Co-Chair, before tomorrow? What time are we meeting? 8:30? All right, unless there's anything else from the good of the group, we'll meet you all back here at 8:30. Same time, same place. I mean, not same time, but we'll see you in the morning. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.